Welcome everybody. Welcome to the meeting, both to everyone in the room and those watching online at home. The meeting is being webcasted and everyone seated must use microphones to be heard on the webcast. There are no scheduled fire alarms, so if one goes off, it's for real. There are 2 exits in this room, one through the double doors over there and another behind me to the right. Now, some introductions. I'm Councillor Stephen Watson, the Chair. Next to me is Councillor Joe Thomas, the Vice Chair. Somewhere we have Jackie Bruce. I'm the Section 106 Programme Manager. To my left is Neil Button, the Interim Team Leader of Strategic Applications. We have Rachel Lee, our Legal Advisor, and Peter Mannings, the Committee Support Officer. Further to my left is James Mead, Principal Planning Officer. And further to the left is Martin Plummer, Assistant Director, Place Delivery. We also have, somewhere to my left, Joanna Russell, Principal Planning Officer, and Sarah Saunders, Director for Place. I would also like to introduce the Council's Executive Member for Planning and Growth, Councillor Vicky Glover-Ward, who won't be taking an active part in this meeting, but is here in an observing capacity. Excuse me. Item 1 is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, just the one from Councillor Yvonne Estop. Thank you.
Okay, Chairman's announcements. First of all, I would like to draw members' attention to next week. We have a Development Management Forum, DMF. This is covering development at Old River Lane in Bishop Stortford. So that's Tuesday, the 21st of April at 7 p.m. here in the Council Chamber. And I'm also duty bound to remind you again to use your microphones when speaking. Do we have any declarations of interest? Joe.
Thank you, Councillor Watson. For agenda item 5B, whilst I work for Hertfordshire County Council, in my day job, I've got no involvement in the pre-planning process. So just to let the committee aware of that.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. Okay. So item 4, minutes from 11th of March 2026, and that's in our reports pack, pages 6 to 14. If there are no amendments, please can we have a proposer for the minutes being inaccurate? Councillor Devonshire. And a seconder? Oh, sorry. Councillor Stowe. I know. If you could just sort of keep an eye on that. So they've been proposed and seconded. All those, well, can we have a vote to approve?
Hands a bit further up.
Hands a bit further up for Peter. 3, 4. And against and abstentions. So that's carried. Now, on to our first planning application, item 5A. This is application 3/25/1097/FUL. Land to the rear of Hill House, Tower Hill, Much Haddam, Hertfordshire. And I would like to invite James Mead to present the application.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks full planning permission for the erection of 31 dwellings, including affordable housing, a new vehicle access off Tower Hill, landscaping, public open space and play space, outdoor education space, cycle and car parking, and associated infrastructure. This is the site location plan for the planning application. and an aerial image identifying the site. From the aerial image, you can see that the site is made up of an undeveloped field and small pockets of trees. The aerial image shows the village boundary of Much Haddon in the purple. It's clear that the site is located to the east of Much Haddon and predominantly outside the village boundary of this village. The location of most of the site beyond the village boundary means that the site is largely within the rural area beyond the Greenbelt. The site sits between two roads, with Tower Hill, the main road running through Much Haddon to the west, and Owdall Lane to the east. There are several residential properties on Tower Hill to the west of the site, whilst to the south there is a more modern housing development at Ash Meadows. To the north of the site is St Andrew's C of E Primary School. This is an image from the applicant's transport statement, which shows the proximity of the site to the village facilities within Much Haddon. There is a health centre directly to the south of the site, shown in the brown dot, while further to the southwest, shown in the red dot, is a local shop and post office. Neighbouring to the north and identified by the yellow dot is the primary school. There are also bus stops on Tower Hill directly to the west of the site, identified by the pink dots, which provide access to the 35 bus service that runs between Hertford and Bishop Stortford. This image on the screen shows the public rights of way within the vicinity of the site. Along the southern site boundary is public footpath 025, whilst close to the northwestern corner of the site is public footpath 022, which is currently shown on the rights of way mapping as running directly through the school grounds. This is an image facing northwest across the site. On the left-hand side, you can see the small area of woodland within the site, while on the right-hand side, you can see the well-vegetated boundary of the site with Owdall Lane. This is a further image facing west across the site. In the background of this image, you can see Hill House, which is a Grade 2 listed building. This is a further image of the site facing south. On the right-hand side of the image, you can again see the small area of woodland, whilst in the background, you can see houses on the Ash Meadows development. This is an image facing north along Owdall Lane. The site is on the left-hand side of this image, behind the vegetation. This image shows the rural character of Owdall Lane. This is an image facing north along Tower Hill. The site is on the right-hand side of this image. You can see the Grade 2 listed Hill House and almshouses in the background of this image. The application site is identified in the Much Haddon Neighbourhood Plan as a reserve housing site to help meet any future additional housing need for Much Haddon. On the left-hand side of this slide is an image of the policy map from the Much Haddon Neighbourhood Plan, which identifies the location of the reserve site. Whereas on the right-hand side is an image of policy MHH10 from the Much Haddon Neighbourhood Plan. This is a site-specific policy. Moving on to the proposals. This scheme proposes the erection of 31 dwellings on the site. It's proposed to create a new vehicle access from Tower Hill into the site at a location to the south of Hill House. A new access road is proposed to run eastwards into the site from Tower Hill. The scheme also includes the provision of public open space that would contain pedestrian routes and play equipment. In addition, it is proposed to provide an outdoor education space for the adjacent school. The image on the right-hand side of this slide is the site layout plan for the application. This shows the housing development focused in the central and southern parts of the site, whilst the public open space would be provided on the northern side of the site. The outdoor education space would be delivered in the area along the northern site boundary. This table shows the overall housing mix proposed on the site. It's clear from this table that the scheme proposes a mix of housing ranging from 1-bedroom flats up to 5-bedroom houses. It is, however, proposed to provide a high proportion of 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom houses. The scheme would provide 40% affordable housing, which equates to 12 units. A tenure split of 83% affordable rent and 17% shared ownership is proposed. The table on this slide shows the size of the proposed affordable units. There's been no affordable housing delivered in Much Hadham in recent years, and none of the site allocations in the Much Hadham neighbourhood plan are of size that they have or would provide affordable housing. The application is supported by a housing needs survey, which reveals a demand for 17 affordable units in the parish. This application seeks to contribute towards meeting this demand, and the size and type of affordable units in the scheme has been directly informed by the outcomes of the housing needs survey. This image on the screen shows the indicative layout for the outdoor education space, which would constitute an extension of the school grounds. This shows that this part of the site could accommodate play facilities, an outdoor classroom structure, and a forest school area. The final details of the outdoor education area would be secured by a condition. The scheme would overall be delivered at a low density of approximately 21.8 dwellings per hectare. It can be seen from the site layout plan on this slide that the development we'd laid out with curved and angled building lines to create an informal layout more appropriate for rural or semi-rural settings. In addition, the northern cluster of buildings would be arranged in a circular layout to mimic a farmyard. These are some visualizations which show how the development could look. The top left image is facing eastwards down the main access road, with the rural barn-style dwellings on the left-hand side and the other houses on the right. The top right image is facing south-eastwards into the site. Again, you can see the barn-style dwellings in the foreground. The bottom left image is facing westwards along the main access road. The mix of materiality is evident in this image. The bottom right image is facing northwest across the site, with the attenuation pond in the foreground and the dwellings present behind. This is a further visualization which faces south across the site, with the public open space in the foreground and the housing development in the background. Again, the farmyard and rural design of the buildings on the northern part of the housing development can be seen. These are section drawings that show the architectural approach for the southern part of the housing development. These reveal that the development has been restricted to 2 stories in height, with predominantly pitched and some hip roof designs proposed. The mix of materiality is also evident in these section drawings. These are elevation drawings for proposed dwellings on the northern part of the housing development. It's clear that these dwellings have been designed to create a rural or farmyard character for this part of the development, with rural style materials proposed. This image identifies the proposed pedestrian connections between the site and the wider highway and public right-of-way network. Along the southern site boundary, it is proposed to create 3 pedestrian connections onto public footpath 025. A footway connection is also proposed onto Tower Hill, adjacent to the proposed vehicle access point. The public open space on the northern side of the site would include an east-west footway that would connect Tower Hill to Owdle Lane. This east-west route could be used as an alternative to public footpath 022, which is currently shown on right-of-way mapping as running directly through the school grounds. Turning to landscape character, the site is within landscape character area 93, the Hadhams Valley. However, it is also adjacent to landscape character area 87, the Middle Ash Valley, as is evident from this image on the screen. The impact of the development on these landscape character areas and on general landscape character is considered in the committee report. The image on the left-hand side of this slide is from the applicant's landscape and visual impact appraisal. This identifies all the long and mid-distance views considered in the appraisal. Of particular note is viewpoint 24, which is representative of priority view 6 from the Much Hadham neighbourhood plan. This view faces west towards the site from a hill known as Steep Jack Hill, which is on the eastern valley slope of the River Ash. The right-hand image shows the proposed development superimposed into this view. Viewpoint 28 from the applicant's landscape and visual impact appraisal is also of note. This is representative of priority view 12 from the Much Hadham neighbourhood plan. This view faces north towards the site from a bridleway that runs through a woodland. The right-hand image on this slide shows the proposed development superimposed into this view. The overall visual impact of the development, including the impact on these priority views, has been considered in the committee report. In terms of heritage, the site is located within the Much Hadham Conservation Area, and the left-hand image shows the central location of the site within the conservation area. There are also several listed buildings in close proximity. The closest listed buildings to the site are the Grade 2 listed Hill House, which is shown in the top image on the right-hand side, and the Grade 2 listed Almshouses, which are shown in the bottom image on the right-hand side. These listed buildings are located to the west of the site on Tower Hill. The impact of the development on the conservation area and the setting of these listed buildings has been considered in the committee report. In regard to highways and parking, the scheme would give rise to a modest level of vehicular trips as set out in the table on screen. The vehicle access into the site would be from Tower Hill, and the image on the right-hand side shows the approximate location of the new access point. The Highway Authority have raised no objections to this access. The scheme would provide a level of parking largely in line with the council's parking standards. In regard to trees and biodiversity, the scheme proposes to retain all high quality and moderate quality trees on the site, and is also proposed to retain and manage the woodland in the southwestern corner of the site. The scheme does include some removal of low quality trees. However, it's proposed to offset this with the planting of 129 new trees on the site. The scheme would overall deliver a 16.83% biodiversity net gain, largely through tree, shrub, and wildflower planting. In terms of flood risk, flood zones 2 and 3 extend into a small area of the site in the southeastern corner. However, the remainder of the site is within flood zone 1 and therefore is at low risk of flooding. It is proposed to locate all the built development within flood zone 1. In terms of drainage, the left-hand image on this slide shows the surface water drainage strategy for the site. It is predominantly proposed for surface water to filter through permeable paving and drains into a pipe network, with water then piped into attenuation basins on the eastern side of the site. The water would then discharge at a controlled rate into a culvert before ultimately discharging into the River Ash. The right-hand image shows the foul water drainage scheme for the site. It's proposed to divert an existing sewer into the site. The new foul water drainage infrastructure on the site would then connect into this diverted sewer. As noted previously in this presentation, the site is within the neighbourhood area for the Much Hadham neighbourhood plan. This neighbourhood plan is part of the development plan and sits alongside the district plan. The neighbourhood plan includes a list of objectives for the plan period, as shown on the right-hand side of this slide. Included within this list are objectives that aim to protect the character of the built environment, the rural landscape and views. In addition, these objectives aim to maintain a strong community spirit by supporting sustainable development close to the centre of the village and encouraging housing mixes that prioritise smaller units. The neighbourhood plan identifies site allocations to meet a housing target of a minimum 54 new homes in the village over the plan period. This application site is not identified as contributing towards this target. However, this minimum target of 54 new homes is out of date, as it stems from the district plan development strategy, which is also out of date. On this basis, the committee report explains that the weight attributed to the strategy within the Much Hadham neighbourhood plan to meet the minimum housing target should be reduced. Members should consider this when coming to a view on overall compliance with the neighbourhood plan. The neighbourhood plan identifies the Hill House site as being suitable for housing development to meet future housing needs for Much Hadham, subject to the criteria of policy MHH10 being met. Officers have considered the proposed scheme against policy MHH10 in the committee report, and a summary of officers' assessment is shown in the table on the screen. From this table, it's evident that officers consider that the scheme complies with policy MHH10 when read as a whole. In summary, no objections have been received to this application from statutory consultees. The committee report has also considered the detailed comments from the parish council and local residents. The committee report has identified several benefits that would arise from the scheme and also some adverse impacts. These benefits and adverse impacts are listed in the table on screen, with the relevant weighting from the committee report noted. In officers' view, the benefits of the scheme would be assigned significant positive weight, whereas the adverse impacts would attract moderate negative weight. Therefore, the adverse impacts of the scheme would not, in officers' view, significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. On this basis, officers' recommendation is for approval, subject to conditions and a Section 106 agreement. I'd like to draw members' attention to the late reps sheet.
Okay, thank you. That was a marathon report and a great presentation. Now, we have speakers, no objectors. So next up is the speaker for, or we have two speakers, Alexandra Woolmore and Emily Mackenzie, representing the applicant. Yes, so you're sharing 3 minutes.
I'm actually speaking with speech. I'm just Emmy's here.
Yes, okay.
My name is Alex Woolmore, Group Planning Director at Hill. We are an award-winning, privately owned, 5-star house builder founded on partnership and collaboration with a number of active schemes across Hertfordshire. The site before you today is a reserve housing allocation in a Much Haddam neighbourhood plan under policy MHH10. Over the past 2 years, we have worked closely with the Parish Council, St Andrews Primary School and the local community to shape a high-quality scheme that meets all of the requirements of that policy. A parish-wide housing needs survey prepared in conjunction with the Parish Council identified a clear need for new homes within the village. 71% of respondents confirmed their support for development with new affordable housing. This scheme responds directly to that evidence. 12 of the 31 homes will be provided as affordable. This ensures the development meets local needs in accordance with policy MHH10, the local plan, and an acknowledged need across the district. Importantly, the proposals go beyond policy requirements in many areas. The scheme exceeds the Council's sustainability requirements, delivering a 64% reduction in carbon emissions against Part L. All homes will also include air source heat pumps and electric vehicle charging. A significant new village meadow will be created to the north of the site, with 52% of the site area given over to public open space. This will transform currently inaccessible land to somewhere the whole community can enjoy. The scheme also delivers strong on-site BNG of 16.8% for habitats, including new wetland and grassland areas. We are also planning to plant 129 new trees and around 1,700 shrubs. Working with the school, we have incorporated a dedicated outdoor learning area for pupils, which will be delivered turnkey and transferred to them. The design also creates an east-west route, enabling the County Council to divert the existing public right-of-way away from the school grounds. The development has been carefully designed to reflect the village's character and landscape. It is sensitive to the setting of Hill House and the conservation area. Homes are positioned in the south of the site, respecting the priority views in the neighbourhood plan. Any impacts are appropriately mitigated through building design, layout, and the extensive open space. The range of materials, roof lines, and built form means no one building looks the same, creating a varied, interesting streetscape. The site will deliver just over £900,000 of Section 106 contributions, including education, transport, health and fitness, youth services, green spaces and libraries. As I hope we have demonstrated, this proposal has been carefully put together through engagement with the local community and aims to deliver more than just new homes. Alongside much needed housing, it brings meaningful benefits to the residents of Much Haddam and the school. The scheme represents a logical and proportionate extension to the village on a sustainable site which was identified for potential development in the neighbourhood plan. Thank you for your time, and we hope you'll support the positive recommendation before you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right, members. Now we're invited to ask questions. Yes. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your detailed report. It's nice to have a full application in front of us. I have one question on sustainability and parking. Now, Much Haddam has the highest level of multiple car ownership of any location in East Hertfordshire, and also the lowest levels of public transport. How can you assure that this development will provide enough parking spaces for those cars? Because I'm sure they'll have it. I think on average it has 12% more than average for more than 2 cars per household. So is there enough parking provision in the actual plans? Because I'm sure these are quite expensive houses, people have multiple cars there. And how will that impact the village parking? Because Much Haddam High Street's already got a contraflow due to parking issues. Thank you.
Hey, Mike, I had a question which is kind of linked. I don't know if it's worth me just.
Yeah.
Um, so when we had the presentation earlier, there was talk about the number of vehicles going to the site, which seemed very low to me. So I'm also trying to understand how that's been assessed and how you come up with the numbers of how many vehicles are going to be on site, which probably links to Councillor Hill's question as well, just to make sure it is a kind of sustainable site. Thank you.
Okay, you're happy to tackle both of those questions?
Yeah, I'm going to certainly start. So there are 70 off-street spaces for residents on the site for their use, and obviously their visitors use their homes. We also have 11 visitor spaces for the public. Now 6 of those are located off the main internal access road. So in creating the access, we acknowledge that some of the space that people use to park on the road at the moment on Tower Hill are removed, but we've re-provided those spaces, which equate to about 4 spaces. They're not formal spaces, it's just on street, but they equate to about 4 spaces, and we're re-providing 6 spaces on the site. So we're actually adding some car parking for visitors, because we acknowledge that we've had feedback in our consultation around parking on that particular road. So the spaces that we're providing, and I think this is confirmed in the officer report, is policy compliant, minus 1 space. I think there's 71. So that hopefully provides some comfort that we're meeting the council's policy expectations around parking provision, and that it's all off street. In relation to your question, it's a bit harder to answer because obviously we're not transport consultants, and we don't have one here with us today. What I would say is obviously the transport consultant has used a industry standard methodology, and that has been considered by the Highways Authority and the council, and no objection was raised in relation to either the methodology or the conclusions that it reached.
Okay, so Councillor Buckmaster and then Terry Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed from the plans you've only got 1 access road in from Tower Hill. So are you not planning an emergency access anywhere? Because certainly on some developments, there's been one major one in Harlow where they actually had to rebuild an extra access point due to a major fire, which blocked the whole area. And recently, in the last few days, in Sawbridgeworth, one development had roadworks at the end of their access road and blocked the whole development for several hours, much to the annoyance of all the residents who lived there. So is it something, bearing in mind you've got Oundon Lane running to the back of you, is there something you could consider putting in an emergency access point?
I think,
Oh, sorry.
yeah, so as Alex has just alluded to, the scheme has been detailed designed by our transport consultant, and the scheme as submitted has been reviewed and agreed by County Highways. The scheme itself is relatively small, so a scheme of this size would not necessitate a separate emergency access or indeed a second access for general vehicular use. So I think as designed and as proposed, officers, our transport consultant and also the Highways Authority are content that it is designed in a way that would allow sufficient emergency access if required.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for your introduction. Can I just ask about the air source heat pumps? Just a little bit more about them, how they're going to be powered, and if it's solar panels, where are they going?
But just deal with the solar panels first. We haven't proposed solar panels in this scheme. We generally find that the proposals that we've put forward, which include the air source heat pumps, are generally more efficient and create better performance overall, simplistically. So we haven't proposed them here. We also were very mindful of some of the sensitivities that were covered in the officer's presentation around the views, and we've worked very hard around orientation of buildings to respect that. So not all buildings would actually work with solar panels. So we focused on the air source heat pump. In terms of the source of energy for the air source heat pump, I'm going to trip him.
An engineer, but I believe they're connected to the House of Mains Power, and they run that way. But they do obviously deliver an energy saving and a benefit overall.
Right. So I had about 3 hands go up there, but while I sort that out, Councillor Burt.
Yes.
It's about the education area for the school, which I think looks really lovely in the design. So is that going to be designed in conjunction with the school?
Yes, so we've had numerous discussions with the school over several years on what that area could contain and what purpose or use it could have for the school and what genuine benefit it could bring to the children who attend that primary school. So what you've seen today has been reviewed and designed in conjunction with the school. And I'm sure when we come to submit the detailed condition, if we are successful, we will be refining and finessing that design with the school again.
And they will then be in charge of the maintenance and the
Yes.
payment, any payments ongoing.
Yes, so as Alex alluded to in her speech, we are committing to the area of land. We are committing to the detailed design and the delivery of that space. So it will be turnkey, and we will transfer the land to the school, and they will then be responsible for its onwards maintenance, and they can use it as they see fit.
Right. And so in effect, you're enlarging
the school grounds. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Marlowe.
Hi, thanks for your time. Could you give me a bit of detail around your design ethos for the properties in there? James described them as farmyard-like, and I'm curious about that because Much Haddam isn't really a farming village. It was very affluent. It was on the coaching route, and it had the Bishop's Palace there for quite a few hundred years. So a lot of it was around the wealthy people that lived there, not farmers. Those were in the villages and the hamlets outside. So why did you think about a farm look for this particular site?
Yeah, so I mean, we undertook extensive pre-application engagement with East Herts, including design landscape officers, and the element of the site which we are referring to as the farmstead, which has that more rural look, was sort of born out of discussions with officers at East Herts. So you would note from some of the visualizations that were put on the screen, not every part of the site has that more timber-clad barn appearance. That is sort of restricted or limited to that northern sort of circular area, and the rest of the housing area is slightly more traditional brick, render, etc.
Okay, so we have Councillor Devonshire, and then we'll finish with Councillor Dunlop.
Thank you, Chair. My questions kind of follow on from other people's questions. Firstly, parking. And the big problem with parking is school drop-off and pick-up times. You've got 11 visitor parking spaces here. I suspect, if given the chance, they will all be taken up with parents dropping off and picking up children at school drop-off and pick-up times. So that's my first question. Second one, air source heat pumps. I think there's one for every dwelling, isn't there? So there's 31 air source heat pumps. My question is about the noise from them. How do you how are you going to tackle the attenuation of that noise from 31 heat pumps?
So if
Thank you.
I can deal with the air source heat pumps first, and correct me if I'm wrong, James, but I do believe that we have a planning condition proposed that relates to the air source heat pumps, and we will have to be, we will be required to submit details about those pumps, the noise, and how that noise will be attenuated. So that is something that will come forward in detailed design, but these are we have Hill as a business have been delivering air source heat pumps in our homes for several years now, and you know, we have always managed to make sure that they are delivered with appropriate acoustic mitigation, and they don't cause an issue for residents or adjoining users of the site.
Should we pick up the
Yeah.
parking? So as I suggested earlier, there are 11 visitor spaces across the site. 6 of them are focused on the access road nearest Tower Hill. They're the ones I suspect will be used by parents, and if anything, they were put there partly for that reason, because we were very acutely aware of feedback that was saying that it's a problem on that road. So it wasn't just about losing spaces, it was about enhancing the provision as well, insofar as we can. The others are more embedded into the site, so they won't be, I suppose they won't be prevented from using them. Whether they choose to use them because they're less convenient, perhaps not, but they're spread, those others are distributed around.
And finally, Councillor Dunlop.
Thank you. Mine's about the solar panels. You say you're not putting solar panels on the houses, which was a little bit surprised about. And then one of the reasons you quoted was that because of the way it would look. But people will move in and put solar panels on these roofs, and it will look a hell of a lot worse than it does if they're integrated right at the beginning.
That's right. So I think, as I suggested, we don't tend to use solar PVs because of the efficiencies. I think just they tend to offer, in our experience, a 20% saving. When, as I said earlier, the air source heat pumps can be, in terms of Part L, sorry, can be more efficient. So that was the starting point for us, and I think that's based on experience of using different technologies. As an organisation, we're hugely committed to sustainability and sustainability measures. We've pioneered zero bills homes. We've won awards for our sustainability. So we're open-minded about technology and which ones work, but we will only use ones that we feel work. In terms of the aesthetics of it, I take your point. People may make a choice in due course. Obviously, the orientation of the buildings will also affect that choice, because they will have to work with the way the buildings are laid out. I would like to think that our buildings are going to work and are going to be efficient, and that people will see the benefits of that in terms of the performance of the building and their own bills. And that's certainly been our experience elsewhere. And so hopefully they won't see a need to add the solar panels. And I think we felt that we were achieving significant performance without the solar panels. So in the balance of all the different constraints and considerations, we opted to focus on the air source heat pumps.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
I'm not just for the record, I'm not convinced by that answer, because you give the people the opportunity to earn a little bit of revenue then if they're so efficient.
So, John, I think that's something maybe we could, in the debate, you could ask officers as well about, because you touched on things that were more general planning. Thanks. So thank you very much. Now, speaking for the Parish Council, we have Ian Hunt, Much Haddon Parish Council. You have 3 minutes as well when you're ready.
Good evening, councillors. I'm the chair of the Parish Council's Planning Committee and I led our neighbourhood plan project. In paragraph 631, the planning officer reported that the district council's landscape officer raises no objection to the proposals. What the landscape officer actually wrote was, quote, "The proposed cluster of plots 16 to 31 feels overly dense and cramped. This area requires a fundamental rethink," unquote. That sounds like a major objection to half the development, and you might want to explore that further. Regardless, the core issue for you to decide is whether the application conflicts with the neighbourhood plan. The neighbourhood plan extended the village boundary to include all sites allocated for development. And as these were all small sites, this meant there would be market-led developments with no affordable housing. This reserve site was not included within the village boundary. Had this site been wanted by residents for a market-led development with some affordable housing included, we would have brought it into the village boundary. Instead, keeping it outside enabled its potential development as a rural exception site led by affordable housing in sufficient quantities to meet local needs in full. Neighbourhood Plan Policy MHH 10 says, to help meet any future additional housing need, the land to the rear of Hill House could be brought forward. The need must either be required or proven and supported by a parish-wide housing needs survey. The affordable housing survey that was undertaken didn't show a need for a market-led development. The need for this housing has not been supported by a survey, so the policy requirement is not met. Thus, the proposal conflicts with the neighbourhood plan. District policy GBR2's permission for development in the rural area, if it is in accordance with the neighbourhood plan, does not apply, contrary to paragraph 936 in the planning officer's report, the conclusion of which is therefore falsely drawn. As GBR2 does not apply and the proposal conflicts with the neighbourhood plan, paragraph 14 of the national framework applies, again contrary to the officer's dismissive conclusion in paragraph 10.7. As a reminder, paragraph 14 applies where there is a district shortfall in a 5-year housing supply and there is a recently adopted neighbourhood plan that contains its own housing policies and allocations, as we have here. Having met these criteria, paragraph 14 rules that, quote, the adverse impact of allowing development that conflicts with the neighbourhood plan is likely to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits, unquote. So just to be clear, the national framework is saying that the lack of a 5-year housing supply, regardless of the extent of the shortfall, does not of itself justify overriding the neighbourhood plan housing policies. To conclude, your decision should be to refuse permission on the grounds of conflict with policy MHH 10 and because the adverse impact of allowing development that conflicts with the neighbourhood plan significantly and demonstrably outweighs the benefits, contrary to paragraph 14 of the national framework.
Thank you. Your time's up. Members, any questions? Nope. Well, all remains is to thank you.
Okay, thank you for your time.
Okay. So this is a complex application in the sense that it brings in these new aspects around the, what do we call it? The principle of development. Would anybody like to kick us off? Councillor Stowe.
Could we go back to the drawing showing the footpaths? I want to clarify something. You don't do. It's another one earlier than that, I think. It shows the footpath in a red or orange colour.
Is it the one where it goes right through the school?
That one. Sorry, that's it. Now, you showed that purple line going through the school, but my understanding was that footpath 022 goes down the side of the school between the field and the school. Now, is that right?
So there's a permissive footpath.
Yeah, that's one going through the school, isn't it?
So there's a permissive footpath along the northern site boundary.
That's the pretty one, is it?
That's not a right of way.
Right.
Permissive
Okay.
footpath along the northern boundary that runs between Tower Hill and Aldle Lane. The right of way is shown as running right through the school grounds.
Okay. When I walked round there, that looked like more like the footpath, didn't it? Really? I was concerned, you see, with the bit of land that the school's taken on, that I wanted a condition that keeps the existing footpath open until the other one's constructed. Otherwise, it'll be blocking the footpath, which I believe is actually not allowed to do without full permission. Because I got caught by that many years ago. Could you answer that one for me, please?
So the public right of way, that wouldn't be blocked up because that's not running through the site. In terms of the permissive footpath, but that'd be incorporated into the school grounds.
Okay. When I walk round there, that footpath you show, it goes along the back of the houses, doesn't the almshouses? That's one, is it?
Yeah.
Right. Got it. Okay. Thanks. That's fine. Let's clarify.
Councillor Devonshire and then Councillor Copley.
Thank you, Chair. Just a bit of information really for Councillor Stowe. That footpath does go through the playground of the school, believe it or not. Yeah. I know it's hard to believe, but it does. This is fundamental to me. Parish Councillor Ian Hunt, who led the neighbourhood plan, says it conflicts with the policy MHH10 of the neighbourhood plan. But in paragraph 10.4 of this report, you say that the principle of development is supported by the Much Adam neighbourhood plan. So I need to drill down on that. I've got some conflict there, and I need to know. I need a bit more information on that, please, because for me that is fundamental. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just say my question is actually connected again?
Yeah, go for it.
So again, I was going to ask about moving on from that, if officers could just cover NPPF 14 and how that, links up with this as well, please.
So in terms of the Much Adam Neighbourhood Plan Policy MHH10, you'll see in the committee report there's a table in the conclusion. Can't remember exactly what paragraph it is. It's at paragraph 10.2, which sets out our assessment of the proposal against the reserve site policy, which is this policy H10. And you'll see from that table, which is also
that's page 150.
You'll see from that table, and also from this table on the screen, which basically is the same table, that in officer's view, we consider that the proposal complies with the neighbourhood plan, with that policy as a whole. And because we've concluded that it complies with that policy as a whole, paragraph 14 of the NPPF, we concluded that's not engaged. Because that only becomes engaged if we identify conflict with the neighbourhood plan.
Zip, would you like to be? Would it help, Councillor Devonshire, if we could sort of take you through each element of the MH10 policy? Because I think we appreciated that this was going to be a very key and central to the committee's determination of the application, as it was very much our assessment before we arrived at a conclusion. And so we've given very careful consideration to the neighbourhood plan, it being a more recent document, part of the development plan, than our district plan of 2018. And so it's right that we give the neighbourhood plan its appropriate weighting and role in this assessment. The first sort of part of the policy, which we've referenced in the table on page 134 of the report, mentioned it, we consider it meets the needs to provide future additional housing. You'll have heard from the parish council that identified that the housing needs survey was to cover affordable housing as well as market housing. Well, the affordable housing has been established through the housing needs survey, and so it's met that first part of the policy requirement. In terms of the need for market housing, well, market housing, there is a district-wide need for market housing, and so that is an established and known fact throughout the district that housing, affordable and market is needed in Much Haddon. The affordable housing is partly provided as the market housing rather is an enabler for that affordable housing, so it enables the delivery of affordable housing through provision of market housing. So we've considered the first part of the policy, and I think the other part that was touched upon by the parish and in the representations in the report is about how the development can be brought forward via a neighbourhood development order or community order. That's the policy says how it could be brought forward. It's not saying it's the only way of bringing forward the site, and so a planning application is another equally reasonable way to bring forward the site through planning. The second part of MH10 provision in the principle of
Neil,
development.
can I just stop you there? I saw Councillor Buckmaster, were you wanting to come in on that specific point? I think we will. We just covered that. So if you could just,
Thank you. Yeah, I was very surprised you just said that this affordable housing met our needs. When on paragraph 9.61, it actually, the SHMA sets out that our highest need in the district is for 3-bedroom houses. And this is giving us 1. I'm also a bit disappointed for the fact that all 6 of the 1-bedroom flats are going to be affordable, because that seems to be the pattern in East Herts, is that it's always the flats that are giving over to affordable housing. When we actually, and this is well known, this area needs 2- and 3-bedroom houses, and this is giving us 1 out of 10. And I do understand there has to be a balance between the market and affordable, and for us to be able to get affordable. But I just felt it was rather disappointing that we could not at least have had 2, 3-bedroom houses, at least, something towards our needs. I don't feel this does meet the district needs.
yeah, sorry to interrupt you, Neil, but I just think it was worth.
I think James is going to respond to Councillor Buckmaster, and then I'll go back to the policy. But
we take that point, and it is well established that within the affordable tenures in the whole district, there is a high demand for 2- and 3-bed houses. In this instance, the housing needs survey that was undertaken by the applicant, so the survey of the parish of Much Haddon, they identified this housing mix in terms of affordable housing as being the need in Much Haddon, and that's where this need has come from. So this need is going to address the local need in Much Haddon. It stems from that housing needs survey.
Yeah, and then this is another something to think about when weighing this all up, is that you have a local district plan policy which has a slightly different mix across the whole district, whereas you have a local needs survey that's specific to Much Haddon, and that Much Haddon affordable housing needs identified the smaller units, so smaller than 3 beds, was the preference for affordable housing, and so we've assessed it as meeting the local neighbourhood plan requirement for affordable housing that's responsive to the needs survey, and we've given that perhaps more weight than the district plan policy, and that one of the reasons is that is a more up-to-date survey, and so the policy itself is 2022, I believe, from neighbourhood plan, so it is a more current, more up-to-date evidence, and so we're able to elevate that that housing requirement above the district plan policy, which there's a slight difference in the two. So that's how we've arrived at our consideration on this site, and probably putting the neighbourhood plan requirement above that of the district, which is, you know, a balancing exercise to do.
So if you could, I mean, I interrupted you going through the H10 provisions.
Thank you. And there are other 4 other strands to policy MHH10. The second part of the policy requires development. Any proposal must preserve the priority views preserve the tranquility of Oodle Lane, ensure that there would be minimum adverse effects on the landscape and conservation area and historic environment. The table sets out our assessment of why we consider that part of the policy is met as a whole. However, we've also identified that the scheme would not fully preserve priority view 6, and you'll see from the slide, if we get that up on the screen at some point, that there will be an impact on that view, and therefore we've assessed that view as there would be a change to that priority view. However, we've also considered, and set out in the report, throughout the report, in fact, and in our view, responding to the technical advice in the landscape assessment that considers impacts on character, we think the tranquility of Oodle Lane has been preserved. We also think that the enhancing the eastern boundary and avoiding provision of vehicle into that area is a helpful tool to make sure that it's protected by leaving it free of any intervention. In terms of the effects on the wider landscape, the report identifies the master plan, how it was meant to keep development to the southern part of the site and central part of the site. And so in the key views, development is minimised to the southern area, whereas the setting of Hill House is preserved, and so create that bigger gap between Hill House and Oodle Lane and the school. And so we feel that the development has taken advantage of that and has minimised the impact on the landscape. And that's the same thing for the conservation area and historic environment, really creating that sort of open space at the top end of the site, enhancing the site through tree planting, hedgerows, greening parts of the landscape. We feel that that has meant that the effects have been minimised, and that's what the policy test is. And so on the whole, we feel that part 2 of the policy has been met. I probably won't go into any more detail on parts 3, 4 and 5 because it is all set out in the report, but needs to say we've considered those elements of the policy to be fully complied with. And so what you have is our assessment on the whole that that policy has been met from the neighbourhood plan, and therefore paragraph 14 that was referenced in the report and also by the parish council is not triggered. And so we are determining this in line with the tilted balance as also set out in the report.
And Neil, could you draw the members' attention to this part of the report, and if you could cover it, summarise it a bit, where it talks about paragraph 14.
Sorry, Chair. The paragraphs 10.4, 10.5, 10.6,
yeah,
and then the conclusion in 10.8 summarise the tilted balance. So those are the conclusions that members have to consider very carefully, as we have done as officers in coming to a view on the scheme.
Right. 3 hands immediately. Councillor Stowe, Councillor Terry Smith and Councillor Hill.
Speaking about the affordable housing, when I did the site visit, I had the opportunity of speaking quite a few residents actually. One of them had a special needs son and was hopeful that she would get one of the rented properties for him. Now, is there any way we can actually get the village to be a priority? I know we don't know perhaps the housing association that will take it on, but I just feel that if we could give the village at least some edge on the properties, whereby if they just go back into the bag and they go anywhere, we could bring people into the village for those houses rather than dealing with the local community, which is what I always feel. They'll suffer the development, be nice if they can get some benefit.
Thank you for the question, Councillor. And the council has a nominations policy of how it allocates tenants for affordable properties, and location would be one of the criteria that would be taken into account, along with other criteria of income, household income, and circumstances in each case. And so I think we would probably agree as well that it makes logical sense that for the housing needs survey to identify this needs, that it would need to match the needs from people living in Much Haddam, and therefore, from our perspective, they would be the sort of first in the queue. In terms of the planning system, we won't have we don't have the policies or tools to influence that nominations process, because that's where our legislation sort of sits outside our remit, and so we can secure the affordable housing at the levels that need to be secured, and then is up to a separate process outside of the planning agreement for it to be secured. However, I would say that the nominations agreement does sit in the Section 106 agreement, and that sets out the council's approach and that it takes to allocate people to affordable housing. But I think it's a point that we know we're sensitive to.
Terry.
Thank you, Chair. Either Neil or James. Firstly, I was going to say about the priority views. You did mention, James, in your presentation that you were going to take some trees out, some of them. Do we know how many, or have you done a tree survey there? You've given a very green view of the development. In fact, you can't really see.
Terry, just a little bit closer to your mic, please.
Sorry. You've given a very green appearance to the development. I just wonder how much of that is going to change once you have a survey, if that's happened already. How many trees are we going to miss? I've just got one more question after that.
So a tree survey and arboricultural implications assessment was submitted with the application, and that does identify some trees that have been removed. Those were all low quality, so C classification trees. All the classified A and B, the higher quality trees, were all being retained. The trees that largely the trees that have been removed are the ones that were in the centre of the site, and some just to the side of the woodland. But
covering them.
But the scheme obviously does provide new planting. I think it's 129 new trees. So in our view, the removal of those low quality trees is more than offset with the new tree planting that's proposed.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Can I just one more? It involves, so you said about drainage, which was going to go into a culvert and then into the River Ash. Now I wonder is that normal practice? Have the Environment Agency sort of check that one out?
Yes, so the surface water drainage strategy has been reviewed by the local lead flood authority and by the Environment Agency. Neither of those object to the scheme, and it's not uncommon for surface water to drain into a watercourse like that. It'll be treated as it goes through the SUDS features on site. So it's not an uncommon arrangement.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Graham and then Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Just looping back to parking, and I'm just looking at the neighbourhood plan here, and I'd like just to clarify: does the parking provision for the mix of houses done comply with East Hart parking provision guidelines, which are in the neighbourhood plan, of which is 1.5 spaces for a 1-bedroom, 2 for a 2-bedroom, 2.5 for a 3, and 3 for a 4-bedroom? And the neighbourhood plan acknowledges that car ownership is much higher and actually says that developers may wish to consider going above that level. I've got a second question as well. Of the parking spaces that are allocated, how many of them are garages?
Was that both your questions, by the way?
That's both my questions. I am done with questions.
So I think the scheme includes, I think it was 70 off-street parking spaces, and we calculated the overall need for parking using the parking standard as 71. So there was an under provision of 1 parking space when considered against the parking standards, which is the policy we have to use to assess parking provision. So we considered there was sufficient parking on site in line with the standards and the policy. In terms of garage parking, I can get the layout up maybe. There's a mix in general. There is some garage parking. You can see some of the on the northern side of the development there. That's garage parking. Some in that sort of southwestern corner again. Southeastern corner. That's garage parking. But there is also driveway parking incorporated into the scheme as well.
I've got a question now then. Garage parking, is it realistic? What? I don't want to get into any, crossover into building regs or anything like that, but are these realistic parking spaces, or are they extensions in waiting?
So that they've been designed as being able to accommodate parking of a vehicle. The Much Haddam neighbourhood plan policy D3 has sets dimensions for garage parking spaces, and all of the garages in the scheme comply with that, with those dimensions, so they are capable of accommodating vehicles.
Thank you.
Is it worth saying just quickly that's actually larger than the minimum, absolute minimum that you would normally expect, sort of 2.4 to 4.8 spaces. So it is slightly larger than your very minimum parking space.
I jumped in front of you, Sarah, there. But it's your
It's
turn
all right,
now.
yours was related to last point. So sticking with the neighbourhood plan, I just wanted to circle back, and in it, there's obviously the section that says the need for development of the site would have to be supported by a parish-wide housing needs survey, demonstrating there are people living in the parish who are in housing need and are unable to compete in the general housing market to rent or buy due to the low level of their income. I think what you were saying, if I've understood correctly, Neil, that
Tiny bit closer to your microphone.
sorry, that kind of is superseded just by a general requirement, because I mean, it doesn't sound like this particular requirement has been met. So I'm just trying to understand why we're ignoring it.
I would not ignoring it, councillor. I think
Let's wait.
the survey it identified a need, as was the parish council alluded to, for affordable housing, and the need was 17, and so the development provides 12 affordable, so it meets that local need. In terms of the need for market housing, what I have said on top of that is that the need is established for the district, and the supply that we have at the moment is under 5 years, and so therefore there is a known need for housing across the district, and so it's certainly a combination of the two that we've applied and have assessed as compliant with that requirement of policy.
Thanks. Just want to make sure I understood correctly.
Oh, sorry, Ruth.
Thank you. Actually, this isn't a planning one. This is a section 106 question. I'm just out of curiosity, why is there section 106 money for childcare for 0 to 2 years and then from 5 to 11? What happened to the 3 to 5 year olds?
Thank you, councillor. That's a county council contribution, so I can't actually answer that one specifically. I can only say that they have provided a full justification of the requirements that they put forward.
Tony, and then.
Thank you. I wanted to talk about the treatment of the barrier to Hill House and Elm House with the entrance road. I couldn't find anything on the papers that told me what's going to happen now. I'd like to think there's going to be a sort of 6 foot high fence. And what's the overall width of that road? Are there grass verges on each side, footpaths on each side, or whatever?
Sorry, councillor, is that in terms of the access point or the
access point between Hill House and Elm House? What is the treatment on their boundaries?
So there's new tree planting going alongside the access road. The access road is 5.5 metres wide. That's highway requirements, and then there's a footpath alongside the access road. Beyond that, there's tree planting along the boundary with Hill House and Elm House. There's also a hedgerow that's running around the corner of Hill House to cover the rear boundary of Hill House.
Well, I had the opportunity of speaking to the guy that actually has bought Hill House, and he's planted a row of privets along that boundary, which hoping they're going to grow quickly. But I just felt that there would need to be something more than just a few trees to stop people wandering into their garden. Aren't we going to sort of provide a fence or something?
So the landscape master plan has a native hedgerow around the boundary of Hill House. That's what was shown on the plans, and we considered that was an acceptable boundary treatment in terms of this. It respects the rural character area and provides biodiversity enhancements. That we consider that to be acceptable boundary treatment to Hill House.
Councillor Marlowe.
Hi, I just wanted to clarify something. The way I read it, was that the education area will be handed over to the school. Is that in perpetuity? And what is going to be the status of the ownership of the open land?
So the Section 106 agreement would include a requirement that the land is transferred to the school, so that the land would become part of the school grounds. In terms of the public open space, that would be public open space, so it'd be accessible to anyone, to members of the public, but it would be managed through the management company for the whole site, and the residents would pay a fee that would be used to manage the open space and the planting on site.
Right, but would that be in private ownership, or would it be what is it exactly?
So the public open space, it would be in private ownership, and as I said, managed by the management company. However, it would be accessible to the public, and there would be a requirement in the Section 106 agreement that it remains open to the public.
Okay, thank you.
Would that be classified as public amenity, or how does that?
Generally, just public open space.
All right.
We would probably refer to as
Publicly accessible open space.
Councillor Dunlop.
I'd like to come back to the solar panels. I thought I might. It's going to be impossible for people to add solar panels to these buildings later on, because I'm informed that it's a conservation area, so it may not be possible to add solar panels later on. Is there any way that we can allow some sort of informative that would mean that solar panels would be an offer at the beginning whenever people move in? Because if the solar panels are integrated into the roof, then I would imagine that would pass. Otherwise, it's going to be difficult to add them later on.
That's a tough one.
So I think in terms of the sustainable design of this scheme, I think through the use of air source heat pumps, it goes above and beyond building regulations requirements, and therefore goes above and beyond what our district plan policy can secure. So it meets and exceeds the requirements of our policy through the air source heat pumps without the need for the solar panels. Solar panels could potentially be installed on the properties at a later date. It would require planning permission, and we'd have to consider obviously the fact that it's in a conservation area. But yeah, in terms of policy compliance, the scheme meets our district plan sustainable design policies through the installation of air source heat pumps.
Councillor Devonshire.
Thank you, Chair. Out of some of these questions, I've got a few more questions. The public open space, you said that's always going to be public open space. Is that in perpetuity? Because I can see if it isn't, it shouts out as an infill site for further development.
A bit closer to the microphone.
Sorry. Yeah. Did you get that? If it's not in perpetuity, that is a public open space, it shouts out to me as another infill site for further development in the future. And my other question follows on from the solar panel question. If it's in a conservation area, does that mean that solar panels are frowned upon? I believe it is. But as far as this is for my knowledge, really. I believe you don't like solar panels in conservation areas. Is that correct? Thank you.
On the solar panels, doesn't mean that we wouldn't allow solar panels in a conservation area, particularly on a more modern building where solar panels might be more in keeping. We'd just have to consider every planning application on its own merits and whether the installation of solar panels would be acceptable, having regard to the character of the area. And so there is potential that solar panels could be added to these houses at a later date. We should have to consider that application if it came forward. In terms of the open space, the Section 106 agreement would include a requirement that this is provided as public open space with accessibility to the public. We can't predict what might happen in the future, but through this application, the land is basically passed over to a management company, so it becomes open space, and that's what's before us.
Yeah, I mean, just to say to that, the reason why, well, one of the reasons why that there is a publicly accessible open space in that location is due to the siting of Hill House and the Arms houses, and so if development was proposed close to those assets, clearly they're going to have a greater impact on the way that the assets are appreciated. And so, not to predict what might or might not happen in the future, but there is a reason why there's no housing proposed on that land, and that's to have regard for the sensitive assets as required by the neighbourhood plan policy and the district plan policy. And so it's quite difficult to imagine development being acceptable at the moment, at least, whilst the policies are what they are. But obviously we can't crystal ball gaze that far ahead, and as long as there are the measures securing the land being secured, as open space, as James has said, then we've maxed out the provisions that we can at this point.
And I'd like to bring in Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. As someone who drafts a lot of the Section 106 obligations, the uniqueness about Section 106 obligations is that they run with the line land and bind successors in title and ownership. So if there's a direct planning obligation in this Section 106 securing the public access and use of those areas, regardless of who the owner is, and it probably will be managed through a management company who will become the landowner, that obligation is binding unless and until it's varied. And if it needs to be varied, that they have to come back to the planning authority, who will make an assessment as to the appropriateness of whether that obligation can indeed be varied or not. Sorry, just one more thing. And the technical term, rather than in perpetuity, used these days is normally for the lifetime of the development. That's the description used in the planning obligation. So it means the same thing.
Tony.
It's just a couple of sort of conditions I would like added if I could. I mean, on page 127, item 9234, is comments made about vehicle deliveries on the children drop-off and pick-up time. But I would like to see we make a condition on that rather than just mention it in that item. And the other one is again, it's mentioned, but a condition for the permitted working hours is quite a normal thing, I'd have thought, to get on these jobs. And I think I'd like to see it as a condition, if you can do that. The working hours could survive. It covers most of it, but we need to add on the bit about the working hours.
So is this on the construction management?
So condition 4 is a construction traffic management plan, and one of the bullet points in that list there sets out that the construction vehicles. We're seeking details of construction vehicle movements and requiring them to be outside of school drop-off and pick-up times. And hours of operation is also in there in the list there, so we would secure the hours of operation. Then they would be the standard hours of operation that
they would be set firm conditions that they couldn't. Yeah, okay.
Graham, did you have your hand up? Oh, Terry Smith first, and then
thank you,
then
Chair.
you, Graham.
For remembering me. Yeah, I was just going to say about the adoption of the roads and why Hertfordshire were not involved in that. Or is it there's some reason why they wouldn't adopt these roads?
HEC don't generally. It's not hard and fast rule, but don't generally adopt new roads on housing developments these days. So that's why the roads are identified as private in this scheme.
Beg to differ about it. Yeah.
It definitely is the policy, because I've got a place in my ward that the situation is the same.
Just a minute, it's sort of broken down here. Right. Councillor Hill.
Thank you, Chair.
Unless, Terry, were you finished?
Yeah, no, I'll be interested in hearing what.
Before you start chatting amongst yourselves, I'll bring in Councillor Hill.
Just one question on the look of the development. I mean, it complies with policy, but is it consistent with the look of Much Haddam? So things like roof tiles in Much Haddam vary throughout the village because of the age of the style of when the houses were built and the brick quality as well. Now, a lot of this development just says slate tiles. Are they just all going to be uniform and the same, or are they going to reflect that diversity of the culture of the village?
In our view, in the committee report, we sort of set that we think the housing types and the housing designs do reflect the type of properties within Much Haddon. There was a part in the applicant's design access statement where they've picked up how some of the particular house types have been directly informed by particular buildings within Much Haddon. So we considered that the housing designs do respect and do reflect and pick up on architectural features on buildings within Much Haddon. And in terms of the materials, again, Much Haddon has a variety of material types on buildings in the village. And again, that's reflected in this scheme. There is a condition to secure details of the external materials to ensure that they are high quality and they do respect the conservation area location.
Councillor Buckmaster, did you have your?
No, sorry, I was going to ask about the Spine Road.
All right. All right, members. Are we ready to make a proposal? The first proposal is going to be to follow the recommendations. Does anyone wish to propose that?
I'm happy to propose that, Chair.
Okay, so we have a proposal. Does anybody wish? And Councillor Dunlop, and I'll just take it to the vote straight away then. Peter says hands up nice and high if you are voting. All those in favour? All those against? And abstentions. And I'm taking my prerogative to abstain as well. Carried. So I'm going to, it's coming up for, sorry? Oh yes, planning is granted. It's coming up to, it's just gone 20 past 8. I'm going to suggest we have I'm going to ask if someone wants to, I'll propose it. I'll propose we have a break until past. Can I have it seconded? Councillor Buckmaster, all those in favour? Thank you, that's carried. So We're back. Right, members, now we have before us application 3/24/0091/ land to the east of High Road, High Cross, Hertfordshire. And I would like to invite Joanna Russell to present the application.
Thank you. I'll just first of all draw members' attention to the lay ob sheet. There's been two representations received after the report was published. One is a comment from Historic England. Essentially, they raised no objection, but just want to ensure that our conservation officer considered visual impact on the barn and the church, which has been undertaken as part of the report. The second is a letter received today from a local resident and the late obs list. The concerns are all noted and have generally been covered off in the report already. So this is an outline application with all matters reserved, except for the means of access for residential development of up to 95 dwellings. In addition to that, there's associated landscaping, open space, pedestrian and cycle linkages, SUDS provision and land for a cemetery expansion, education and allotment uses. So this slide here shows the application site in the red line. It's located to the east of High Road, which runs up and down here, and is grade 3B agricultural land. To the north of the site, we have Suits Farm, which contains the farm and then a listed farmhouse here, which is grade 2 star listed, another residential dwelling. To the west of the site, along here, we've got the dwellings on High Road and then the school below that. To the southwest, we've got the grade 2 listed church, St John's Church, and the rectory also listed. To the south of the site, around here, we've got predominantly residential dwelling and around Poplar Close, which is here, and North Drive along here. And a public footpath runs from High Road here through the southern boundary of the site and off that way. And then to the west, to the east of the site, sorry, we've got the A10, which runs down, and there's obviously a gap in between the site and the A10. There's also a spa and service station further down to the south. So this slide shows the relationship of the site to High Cross, apologies, to High Cross Village, which is shown outlined in purple there. High Cross is a Group 2 village, but the application site clearly sits outside of the boundary, although it is adjacent to it. So for the purposes of assessment, the land is rural land beyond the green belt. There are no landscape designations on the site, and it is in flood zone 1 with no protected trees on or around it. These two slides show the context of the site. So it's just up here with the red dot in terms of its relationship to Ware and Hertford, which are the closest towns to the site. And they're just further along the A10. They can be accessed by the hourly bus route, which runs through the village. This map here shows the location of the site in relationship to Wadesmill and Thundridge, which are also Group 2 villages. Wadesmill is approximately 1 kilometre away, Thundridge approximately 1.3 kilometres, obviously depending on where you measure from on the bits, but that gives you a rough idea. They are accessible along the High Road and Cambridge Road, which is lit with pavements. This slide that we have here shows the public rights of way. They're the lines in purple, and bridleways, the lines in green. You can see there 045, which, as I mentioned previously, runs along the southern boundary of the site. And also on this slide, we have the bus stops here. The nearest one is about 100 metres from the access of the site, which is about here. On here, we have the heritage constraints surrounding the site. So again, as I highlighted before, we've got the grade 2 star listed farmhouse and then the grade 2 barn front part of the school, church and rectory. So we're just going to run through some views of the site closer up and further away. So this is, as you can see, it's just outlines here. This is sort of behind the site, looking north, and you can see this at the northern end of the site is the farmhouse, barn, and here's the dwellings that run along High Road up there. This is a view from the northern boundary. So we're here and we're looking south towards High Cross. So you're looking across the site that way. So the Suits farm would be behind you. This is a view from the public footpath on the southern boundary here. So you can just see in the circle, that's approximately where that's from. And it's looking west towards the school. So you can see the school there and a couple of dwellings before the footpath goes behind them or to the side of them. And then again, this is a view standing at the entrance to the footpath on the site, looking north towards Suits Farm and the access, which is up here. So you've got High Road to your left and the A10 here to your right. This is a view, again, standing in the same position by the public footpath where it joins the site, looking northeast. So you've got the A10 over here. You can see quite a big expanse of the site in this view, actually. Suits Farms just here. And this is a slightly further back view. So you can see it's from here, which is on the Thundridge 56 footpath, and you're looking north towards the site. So you can see here the approximate extent of it is here, and Suits Wood, which kind of sits to the right and further back, can just be seen in the distance there. This is a view from the eastern site boundary, so we're just working our way around it now. So standing about here, and we're looking east towards the A10. So we're looking towards the A10 there. There's like a bund along there, which shields the motorway, but sorry, the A road, the A10. But it's just behind there. And again, standing on the eastern boundary, and this is looking across the site west towards High Road. So you can see the house on High Road along here. These are views showing the accesses. So the proposed here, we're standing about here, looking out of the site. There's the farm buildings to the right, and the access runs through there. And in this picture here, you're standing on the service road for the existing farm development, looking out towards High Road. So the application includes 3 parameter plans, and I'm just going to run through those 3, explaining what they show. So this is parameter plan 1, and this shows the land uses and landscape. And these, although this is an outline consent, the parameter plans would all form part of the approved plan package, and this just secures these parameters for the forward development of the site when we move on to reserved matters. So you can see here there's a landscape buffer around the edges of the site, and public along the access, sorry, there, and then public open space around the perimeter there. We've got an allotment at land identified here behind the houses on High Road, and a school expansion area which sits behind the playing fields of the school, that's shown in the orange rectangle there. And the cemetery extension is shown here. Now that sits adjacent to the SUDS provisions, which are shown in the hatched plan, and they're at this end of the site and also up at the northern end there. And this also shows the view of the church, which is to be retained from a viewing mound here. And that just to say that isn't protected in any policy, but it is a view of consideration. So it's been shown as being retained through the development. So this is parameter plan 2. This shows the access and movement on the site. As you this is the existing access, just to explain, which currently goes into the farm and the residential dwellings. This will be retained as a cycle path and footway, with the main access to the site being moved north a bit, and that comes in here into the main body of the site. The final parameter plan shows indicative building heights and densities. These are maximums on the site. So the central residential area here is identified up to 2.5 stories. And then with lower density development around the edges here, up to 2 stories. The average density on site is 27 dwellings per hectare. And just for some context, land along High Road has a density of approximately 22.5 dwellings per hectare. And dwellings on Poplar Close have a density of approximately 17.3 hectares. And that's in comparison to the average of 27 on site. This is an illustrative concept master plan. This isn't an approved document, but it just shows a bit more clearly some of the features that we've just been through. So the access road coming in here, the cycle and footway going in here. Here are the SUDS provisions. They're there and at the southern end with the residential development there. That's the allotment space. And there is a school expansion site and the cemetery site. There are 2 play areas identified there, and this land is all public open space. It's worth just pointing out that landscape, layout, appearance and scale are not for consideration at this stage. We are just looking at the principle of development in outline along with access. So these plans, I appreciate, don't translate very well to a slide, but they are in the application pack, which can be seen online. But it just demonstrates some of the access and off-site improvements shown. These are also provided by members with the site visit pack, so I hope you've had a chance to look at those. There are extensive improvements shown to High Road, which are all listed at paragraph 117 of the officer report. Very briefly, to run through some of them, the 30-mile-an-hour zone on Ermine Street is to be extended approximately 75 metres north to accommodate the extra access there. There's an upgrade of the existing footpath on the eastern side of High Road to provide a shared cycleway and footpath, and a widened footpath on the western side for up to 2 metres, of 2 metres to provide a better footpath along that side of the road. There are upgraded bus stops on High Road, and that includes raised curbing to accommodate people getting on and off the bus. That makes it a little more accessible for pushchairs, disabled users. And there's also an improvement to the footpath that runs along the southern side of the site. All of the improvements are included as part of the 106 agreement, so they will all be secured. There's also the requirement of the provision of travel vouchers for each house in the development of £100 to encourage the use of public transport. In addition, there's a bus service contribution of £250,000 in addition to cycling and walking infrastructure improvements of £236,000. Again, all secured through condition and part of the 106. Here's a few illustrative details that have been submitted just to give a flavour of what could be expected at reserved matters stage. Again, these are not approved documents or images, but they're just to give members an idea of what what's envisaged for the site. So that's exactly as we've just discussed, but with the houses added. And then there's a couple of visuals there of different parts of the site. We've got Suits Farm Edge, that shows one of the visual corridors, and the village edge there. Again, though, these will be part of the reserved matters application, so they're just illustrative at this stage. Members will be aware, as set out in section 10 of the officer report, that because the council are unable to provide a 5-year supply of housing, the application is to be determined under paragraph 11 of the NPPF. I did have a table which just summarised the planning balance that's in the officer's report, but it's not pulled through, I'm afraid. But as detailed in that, the balancing exercise concludes that the adverse impacts of granting planning permission would not significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits, which is the test required in paragraph 11 of the NPPF. On this basis, applying the NPPF presumption in favour of sustainable development, it is recommended that planning permission is granted for the proposal, subject to the conditions and obligations within the 106 agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our first speaker is an objector, Kim Saban. And you have 3 minutes to start when you're ready.
This piece of land is precious. Why? Because it's farmland. We've been told it's not a particularly good piece of farmland, so you might think it's okay to build on, and it's only a small piece of land. There's still the rest of the farm. The problem is that this is happening up and down the country, and particularly in Hertfordshire and other counties which have closer links to London, prime targets for developers aiming to make maximum profits, as they know these houses will be snapped up by people who can afford to pay a premium for a property conveniently situated to commute to a well-paid job, but still out in the country. The problem is, when you start selling off bits of a farm, it becomes unviable. And then what? The rest of the farm is built on, and another piece of precious land is lost. The farming community in the area dies, and there is no point in having a local farm vet or abattoir because those businesses become unviable. The local horse riding business is unable to buy their hay and straw locally, which not only pushes up the cost dramatically, but means more congestion on our roads, transporting it from further afield. If there is a sudden rise in the cost of fuel, such as we are seeing now, they may not be able to afford to continue with their passion. There is an unprecedented amount of building going on around us. Where North has been given the go-ahead, and so has the huge development in Harlow, just on our doorstep. Bishop Stortford, Buntingford, Welling, everywhere you look, more houses going up. Back to this piece of farmland. Is there a better way? This land has been sprayed constantly with various pesticides, ploughed, compacted by heavy farm machinery, which is the way farmers have been taught to farm. We are only just discovering there's a better way to farm in accordance with the laws of nature, and it's been taught up and down the country. Farmers that are farming in a regenerative way don't need all the pesticides and artificial chemicals, which, by the way, have now been proven to cause catastrophic damage to the human gut, now proven to be linked to autism, autoimmunity, and mental health problems, which are epidemic and rising. There are organisations helping farmers to farm in a more natural way whilst increasing production, decreasing dependence on chemicals and subsidies, and making farming enjoyable and profitable. Just think what an asset this farm could be to the area. If you allow it to be built on, you are also denying future generations the ability to farm. If we become dependent on imported food, we have no idea how it was grown, what it's been sprayed with, and we become dependent on transportation costs, which will have a massive impact on price. Locally grown food has been proven to be more beneficial to health for many reasons. We've seen what happens with fuel when we're dependent on imports. What happens if we're unable to import food?
Thank you. Now, members, do you have any questions? Councillor Dunlop.
It's not really a question, but thank you for that. I'm a very keen regenerative farming follower and agree with a lot of the things that you have said there. Thank you for saying them.
All right. Any questions? No, well, thank you. Next, we have a speaker for, and it's the applicant, Richard Martin. And you also have 3 minutes when you're ready.
Good evening, Chairman and members. My name is Richard Martin, and I'm a director at Scott Properties, the applicant. I would like to thank the case officer for a thorough report and presentation and for engaging positively throughout the application process. Since the application was submitted in 2024, amendments have been made to the proposals to address the feedback from the technical consultees. In particular, there were significant additional requirements in respect of highways and transport. We've engaged proactively with officers and consultees throughout this process to ensure that the application comes to this committee with no technical objections and with a recommendation for approval. Heads of terms have been agreed for the Section 106 agreement, which will secure the requested obligations as detailed in the officer's report. I would like to highlight the following benefits of the proposed development. The delivery of up to 95 new homes, which will make a meaningful contribution towards the district's housing delivery. Up to 38 affordable homes, which is policy compliant to address local needs. Over £2.5 million of developer contributions towards education, health, recreation, and other public services. The safeguarding and transfer of land for the future expansion of the primary school, additional land for burials and land for allotments. Off-site highways works to deliver improved walking and cycling facilities in High Cross. Significant areas of new high-quality and publicly accessible open space, including children's play spaces, and a net gain in biodiversity of at least 10%. Whilst this application is an outline form, so it won't have the level of detail you've seen in the previous application this evening, we believe that the proposals meet the high standards expected by the Council for residential development. The agreed framework plan and parameter plans, as shown in the presentation and in the outline design code document we produced, provide a sound basis from which the detailed design can be developed through a future reserve matters application, which would of course come back to this committee. As set out in the officer's report, the application represents sustainable development with the benefits clearly outweighing the harm. We hope that you will endorse the recommendation with your approval today, and I'd be very happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. No members. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Copley and then Councillor Marlowe.
You noted a net gain for biodiversity of 10%, but that doesn't seem too high, and I'm just trying to understand the reason for that, please.
Yes, so there's a minimum statutory requirement for 10%. As the application goes through the detailed design, that figure will become apparent. It would need to be at least 10%. If 10% couldn't be achieved on site, then it would have to be made up through off-site provision. In our experience, this should be around the 15% or so, just based on the existing land use being agricultural and the sort of the net to gross development ratio. So it's about 44% of the sites actually being developed, with the rest going to sort of non-development uses. So it's it would be secured for the future reserve matters application.
Thank you.
Councillor, I'm not calling on you to speak as such, Councillor Hill, but are you hearing if you're struggling? Yeah. Right. So I've got on my list, I've got Councillor Marlowe next.
Thank you for that. I'm just curious. So we've now got a piece of land on the right between the new estate and the A10 there, which presumably is still going to be farmed. Would that be correct?
Yes, so the farm was actually cut in half by the A10 when the A10 was built. So the extent of the farm goes sort of to the north and to the east.
So I'm just wondering, you'll be using spraying methods. Are you thinking in terms of how to protect houses, kids from sprays? I mean, I accept that the prevailing wind is southwest, but that doesn't stop the fact that we do have north and northeast winds as well, which would potentially bring spray right across that estate.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what the current arrangements are, because obviously the field currently abuts existing residential development in the same way as it would. Obviously, it's just being moved out further east than what it is now. So I can't actually answer in terms of the ongoing farming practice of that land. But I assume whatever measures are in place to stop that happening currently would be continued with a similar proximity between the areas of spraying and the residential dwellings. I know that sort of field boundaries are maintained around the land at the moment, presumably for that purpose.
Thank you. So, Councillor Buckmaster.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned that you're giving land for the expansion of the school, burial land and allotments. Can I ask, are you actually giving that land to, as ownership to the school? Are you giving the land to the church? And who will own the allotments?
Yes, thank you. So if I take them in turn, the school, so we've been in discussions with the school through the through the head and the governors since 2017. More recently, we've been in direct contact with the diocese because they're the owners of the land. So in readiness for the transfer of the land to the diocese, they've been making preparations. So one thing is the current school field land isn't actually registered. So one of the requirements that we need to do to make it all work through the 106 is for that land to be registered. So that process is currently underway. So the school land, the transfer of the ownership to the diocese, the school, would be secured via the Section 106 agreement. In terms of the cemetery land, this is something that came to us. It was suggested at the public consultation that there was a need for additional burial land. This is, I think, sequentially the nearest land. It isn't adjoining, but it's in close proximity to the cemetery land. We inquired initially with the church warden via the reverend. We haven't actually received a response to that, but what we're saying is the land will be made available. If it's not taken up, it would revert to public open space in the same way as the other open space. I think if the land secured planning permission, it would be of interest as a an area to have. It's 0.12 of a 0.1 of a hectare, so could provide, we estimate from a similar project we did, around 200 burials, which is sort of fairly significant. I don't know what the current burial rates are. That was one of the questions we asked. But yes, so again, that would be safeguarded. If not taken up, there would be, I think, need to be in the 106 a reasonable time limit. So, the option would be there for them to claim the land, but not, I assume, in perpetuity. But once claimed, it would obviously transfer in ownership. And in terms of the allotments, again, we haven't got a full Section 106 agreement drafted, but there would be, I would imagine, some form of cascade where that would be offered to the parish council, or could, if not taken up. So again, allotments came up through the public consultation. We're not aware of existing provision within the village. We do know that the open space, sport and recreation SBD sets a requirement of 0.3 hectares per thousand. We're in excess of that. We're close to double, albeit it's an outline plan still at the moment, and there is an area of parking required. In terms of how many allotments, I can't say, because obviously an allotment's 250 square meters, but it's more prevalent these days for sort of half or quarter plots, because that's actually it's a lot of land to manage. But again, the offer is there, and we assume it will be taken up. The other purpose, that the allotment serve is to provide a degree of buffer between the existing dwellings along the high road and the proposed dwellings to the east.
All right, and final question, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to say about the size of the development. It's pretty big compared to the actual village that's surrounding it.
A little bit more into your microphone. I'm a bit.
Thanks. Sorry, I've only got a small voice. I just wondered how much percentage. What's the percentage of the development compared to the village itself?
I don't know how many dwellings there are in High Cross currently, but there's obviously that's part of the contextual analysis that will have been undertaken by officers in assessing the proposal relative to the existing village. Another statistic is that there's a capacity for 105 children in the primary school currently, an attendance of 55. So obviously the school's at sort of half capacity. This proposed development would add circa 29 to make the school. Sorry.
I just wanted to go back to what Joanna said regarding density.
I think can we save that for the debate, Terry? Okay, in that case, that's all the questions. Thank you very much for your time. Now, we have Jacqueline Vito from Thundridge Parish Council. And you have 3 minutes when you're ready. Yeah, that's on.
I have a feeling of deja vu tonight, I'm afraid. The parish council remain opposed to the application for 95 homes on this site in High Cross. The officers think that the proposal looks like it's well related to the village, but it is actually a physically isolated housing estate. The only paved cycle pedestrian access to the high road is to the north of Pest House Lane. For estate residents, it would be a 1 kilometre walk to the small shop in High Cross at the garage and 2 kilometres to the Feathers pub in Wadesmill. So I disagree on the distances. So these distances are considerably beyond the recommended distance for a walkable neighbourhood, which is 800 metres. Plus we have the steep hill between High Cross and Wadesmill, which will further deter active travel. Development at this scale is even more unsustainable than the site for 36 homes I spoke against last time. I have 3 points to make regarding the planning conditions. Firstly, the site lies a little higher than the rest of High Cross Village, and homes of 2.5 stories I think are unacceptable. A large area of these are shown on Parameter Plan 3, and I would like that to be reduced to 2 stories in Condition 2 of approved plans. Secondly, to deal with the steepness of the hill between High Cross and Wadesmill, facilities for safe storage of cycles should be amended to facilities for safe storage with charging for electric bikes in Condition 38 cycle storage. And lastly, the surface water flooding issue that impacts the existing homes in High Cross of the proposed development needs to be addressed. This was pointed out in the objection letter that we wrote in February 2024, page 6, paragraph 8.2. A flood alleviation scheme for North Drive and Canterbury Park relies on flood alleviation infrastructure within the proposed development site. This must be protected in Condition 11. So 2 months ago, when we were discussing land to the west of High Road, most of you spoke against the development, but when it came to a vote, only 3 councillors voted against and 3 abstained. I'm going to ask tonight that you please vote in the way that you feel about the application. Don't sit on the fence. And I hope that you vote against it. But if you vote for it, then I ask that you take an active role to ensure that the conditions on this planning application are watertight and reserved matters applications are scrutinised to meet the conditions on the outline application. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Well, Jacqueline Veet. Oh, a late hand shot up there. Councillor Marlowe.
Yeah, have you got any? I've just looked at the population of High Cross, which at 2021 was 853 people. Have you got any idea what it is now, 5 years later?
No, I don't have an update on the census figure.
Thank you.
Sorry.
And Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Just to reiterate what you said about the hill there, which hasn't been mentioned too much between Thundridge and High Cross. It's a very steep hill. I know I couldn't run up it. I couldn't cycle up it. But yeah, it's certainly not easy to get between one or the other. And being another kilometre away.
Do you have a question?
No, I don't. Sorry.
All right. In that case, I will thank you for your. Oh, have I got? Oh,
sorry.
Councillor Burt.
Presumably, most of the children who go to secondary school are going to where? From.
Yes, that's the nearest. That they might go into Hertford.
Yes,
well.
so Chauncey or one of the schools in Hertford. Did there happen to be, or would you know, are there school buses or public buses that most of the children use, or are they relying on cars? Sorry, it's probably a question you may not know.
I think that's asking the. I think you're asking you to speculate.
So okay.
Too much there. I don't think it's.
I apologise for putting you on the spot there.
I'm sorry. I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
School journeys. Okay.
I think I'll thank you for your time now.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Right, members. Now this is it makes quite a different application from the one we've just seen. And Councillor Copley.
So obviously here we're looking at an outline planning application, so we don't have the detail. So just looking at what we do have in terms of the outline, I know there's been some just some comments here about how it links to the existing community. Could we just, officers, just confirm, additional picture, how you would enter into the existing community? Is that only that one access? So effectively, you're kind of isolated from the other dwellings. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, there is just the one vehicular access here. Following submission of the application, a lot of work was carried out between the applicant and Highways Authority, who raised concerns exactly about that issue. The existing current vehicular access, though, is now proposed to become a shared cycle and footpath, and there will be linkages through to the footpath that come out onto the high street here. So in terms of the MPPF and the policy requirements, which are about making sites sustainably accessible, this is policy compliant. The capacity of this access to accommodate the level of residential development is informed by TRICS data and data that the Highways Authority do examine, and they've concluded that it is an acceptable access arrangement. But yes, you are correct, it is just the one vehicular access.
Yeah, thank you. I was kind of keen on the pedestrian bit, so thanks for answering that, because I just wanted to see whether it was isolated.
Councillor Marlowe.
Yeah, sorry, I just want to be very clear. Walking access for this site is also at the top end, or is there going to be a link at the bottom to the footpath?
Yeah. So, sorry. Yes, there will be there will be linkages at the north and south of the site.
Right.
So, this is the existing footpath along the southern boundary here, and there will be linkages onto that path so that pedestrians can access sort of the centre of the high street further down by the school and the church.
Just pedestrians or pedestrians and cyclists?
Pedestrians on here, because this is an existing public right of way. So you're working with what you've already got between here and here, and having walked it, it's really only appropriate for pedestrian access. However, this access at the top here which is existing vehicular access at the moment, this will become a 3-metre shared footpath and cycleway. And there's a lot of highway improvements along here to increase the connections between this cycleway and footpath into the village.
Thank you.
Councillor, I've missed loads of hands there. Councillor Dunlop, and then we're going to Councillor Buckmaster, and I missed some hands over the staff.
My question is still about the footpath. That footpath, will it be maintained whenever it's wet? Will it be walkable by people to the high street without ruining shooting space?
Yes, it will. So it's an existing footpath maintained by the County Council, but the application includes a requirement for improvement works to it, which will likely consist of some kind of loose but hard material, which is more appropriate to the location, but we'll make it, yeah, make sure you don't get soggy shoes, essentially. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
Right, now we have Councillor Buckmaster.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm going to have a moan about the one access again, because there's no emergency access there. I mean, I did wonder whether they shared cycle and footpath, whether that could have some sort of barrier that's removable in times of emergencies, whether that could happen. But sorry, I'm going back to the cemetery again. Are you then expecting hearses and all the funeral cortege to drive through a residential area to get to the cemetery? Because you've got no vehicle access from the church to the cemetery. Either that, or you're going to have your pallbearers carry coffins down a footpath.
Thank you. So in an original iteration of the scheme, this was an access for emergency vehicles. but it became clear that there was going to be a conflict potentially between cycles using and pedestrians using the path, and potentially emergency vehicles going up and down it. And it was exactly as you say, it was to have removable bollards in the case of an emergency. What happened when that was identified as not the ideal scenario is more work was done on this access point here, and it was widened, and some work was done to ensure that that's capable of accommodating both emergency vehicles and refuse vehicles. Turning to the cemetery, it was raised as part of the consultation exercise, and I think in good faith the developer offered it on that basis. There will be provision that if the church doesn't want it, it will revert to open space. I suppose you can but ask, and that's it, I'm afraid.
Right, now, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I've forgotten what I was going to actually ask.
Shall I bring in Councillor Stowe and then you can have a think?
Thanks for that. I said this last time when we had the last application in this area, and I still believe this site is not sustainable, but I know the thing about the housing supply and that sort of overrules it, but it is not sustainable. And I wonder what the thinking was behind having the £100 for a house and £50 for a flat for the bus pass when really few people use it, because you can't get to school that way because the bus is not reliable enough. You can't go to town and get proper shopping. You can't get a workplace in the village. I mean, so what was the thinking behind that? Because it's not really realistic, is it?
Thank you. So that's as I understand it, that's a standard request as part of a travel plan by the Highways Authority. And we actually talked about this when we were on the site visit, and we talked about the fact that people are less likely to use public transport. However, the idea is that if you give people vouchers to use it from the outset when they move into a dwelling, hopefully it will encourage them onto that public transport. And I suppose that goes along hand in hand with the bus improvement contribution that goes towards the local provision and the improvements along the high roads. But it does come from Hertfordshire County Council as part of the travel plan requirements.
106 money for the buses, though, I believe from memory, was 250,000 over 5 years. It doesn't actually mean you're going to get much improved on the surface, does it really? It's a bit worrying. Can I just ask one more question, Chair?
Yeah.
I'm concerned about the entrance. When you see these monster tractors we have these days, which are more likely twice as high as a car, and they're going to use the same access to get to the farm. Is that correct? And how are you going to control that then in terms of safety?
Okay, so again, this is something that's been hashed out with the Highways Authority, and they've used data. And in the officer report, there's some information about the numbers of agricultural vehicles that use the farm site, along with the number of vehicles that are anticipated to use the residential site on a daily basis. It's hard to see because I haven't got a blown up version, but essentially this track is shared by both lots of traffic as you go into here, but round about here it tails off to take agricultural vehicles in one direction and residential in the other. But you are correct, initially they will be sharing the route, but there was information and statistics which underpinned the usage of it. The Highways Authority concluded that there wouldn't be a sort of a adverse safety implication as a result. And as our technical consultee, obviously we trust in the work that they do on that.
Just to come back on that, with the unsustainable bus route, I mean, you could see 190 cars coming through that entrance every day to take children to school, to go to work. I mean, just it's amazing. I can see an accident happen at some point.
A stage 1 safety report was carried out on the access implications of the application. I do not know, or am part of that exercise, so I can't expand on it too much. But I appreciate your point. But that has been considered by the Highways Authority, and they have come back with no objection on it. But thank you.
Councillor Devonshire.
Thank you, Chair. I think you missed out Councillor Smith. But I've
We'll come back at you.
I've got a number of problems with this application. Firstly, we have to grant permission in favour of sustainable development, and I can't see this as sustainable at all. It's outside the boundary of a Group 2 village, not even Group 1 village, Group 2 village, and it's outside the boundary. And the only sustainability is it's near a bus route. That's about it. The other problem I've got is the housing density. The officer told us before it's 27 dwellings per hectare, which is quite high compared to the rest of the village. And my question is, because it's an outline application, can that density go up? So can they go up from 95 houses to more, in which case it's not 27 dwellings, it's more than 27 dwellings per hectare? Thank you.
Thank you. The 27, the density number is based on the maximum number of houses that this application allows. So it's an application for up to 95. So that is the limit in that. And that's also reinforced by a condition in the planning permission, in the list of conditions.
Right. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Basically, it's what you were saying about councillor, about density. I did start to make that question originally, but I totally forgot about it. It was at 27. That was the figure you gave us, and below the estate below is 17, as far as I recall. I know it's early days with the outline planning, but is there could we put a condition in that makes that more acceptable, less in between that number, if this was to go ahead?
So there's a difficult balance to reach on a site like this, which does have different densities surrounding it. However, what we're really pushed towards is the guidance in the NPPF about this. And the NPPF is very clear, and it's in the report, that we should be maximising the use of sites where appropriate, subject to the layout and the visual impact of that. But in order to try and hit our 5-year housing land supply without having to compromise the development strategy that we have, we need to make the most of the sites that do get developed. Now, the impact, the visual impact of what happens on that site will be controlled when we get to the reserved matters stage. So the scale of what goes on there will be controlled, and the layout of that will be controlled. And if it's felt when those if we got to that stage when the detailed plans came in that actually it couldn't work in terms of the character of development around it, then there would be work to be done on that number, and it might come down. So it is limited at 95, but it could come down if there was a significant concern about how that density impacts on the visual and landscape impact. But we are at this stage, when we're looking at the outline consent, very much guided by the NPPF guidance, which is very clear that we need to maximise the densities where we can.
Can I come back on that? Is that okay? Thanks, Jen. It's just the nature of the site. You've just mentioned that entrance. There's a lot of houses here, so the density is going to be very high. You've already got farm traffic. You've got potential burials going on. Children nearby. That's a lot of traffic for that type of entrance, and I just wondered, you know, if that's not, it needs to be gone past the NPPF and make it more acceptable if it's going to happen.
I understand. I mean, I think in terms of the number of cars coming onto the site, as I said before, there's
more houses, more cars.
Yeah, absolutely. But yes, of course.
That's the logic.
In terms of the impact of that traffic, though, that has been assessed by the Highways Authority, and as I say, as our technical consultee, we trust in their conclusions on that.
Can I just come in on the density point as well, just to sort of reaffirm what colleague said? The application proposes a range of housing densities on this site, and it identifies that the outer sort of peripheral area of the developable area would be the lower density areas, and so it is sort of softening out as it reaches the edges, and then in the middle the density range is slightly higher. And so through those broad controls there is some control in the outline application, but with the the details, as my colleague has explained, the design and the layout will set out the visual density of the development and from a sort of design perspective, and that will be subject to consideration at reserve matters. The outline controls set out what we consider to be an acceptable range of densities across the site, and so you will see some lower densities and then some at the higher end of the scale. But the sort of design assessment will be carried out at the reserved matter stage. As Joanne said, the maximum capacity on the site is capped at the moment at 95.
Councillor Hill, and I think I'm aware that there's several councillors waiting. It's going to be Hill, Thomas, Councillor Copley, Councillor Marlowe, and then Councillor Burt.
I'll be quick. Can you explain, now that the access roads move to the north and it will come out where the road speed limit's higher, what speed mitigation will we put in that part of the road? Because cars regularly exceed the speed limit in that part. It's a very straight part of the road, and there was a double fatality there about 10 years ago. So I'm quite concerned that it's coming out onto a very straight part of the road where cars regularly exceed the speed limit.
So the safety audit has been carried out, as I said before. There's quite a lot of improvements proposed to the accessibility of the access of the site in terms of linking it to public footpaths and work on the visibility splays and how the public footpath and cycleways interact with the access and onto the main road. And that's all been considered acceptable and safe. And there's certainly been no objection raised with regards to the safety of the access.
I'm sort of more worried about the speed the cars fly down there. I cycle up there regularly, and cars have gone past me doing 70, 80, 90 miles an hour.
Oh, I see. Sorry, do you mean along the high road?
Yeah, along to the north of it. That's affectionately known, that stretch road is the Curry House Sprint among cyclists.
Oh,
it's very straight, and there's a Strava segment on it, and we fly down it. And but cars take me doing way in excess of the speed limit. I think it's a 50 mile an hour road there. But so what mitigation would put in that, since you'll have people coming out in bikes, pedestrians, cars?
Yeah, so sorry, I haven't got the plan to illustrate, but the 30 mile an hour zone has been extended further north, so that will slow down the traffic for, I think it was 75.
I think what physical barrier will there be? A give way, a contraflow type thing, which is further down the village. As you come off, currently there is, one of those things you have to give way. Now that needs to be moved much further up to physically slow the cars down.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to give a bit of an informational to a question Councillor Stowe had earlier, about sustainable travel vouchers. I've studied that HCC document on sustainable vouchers quite a bit in my day job. The £50 and £100 sustainable travel voucher amount is for an SPD in sustainable supplementary planning document, from May 2014. So I believe that will need to be updated in the same way that S106 obligations would be done so. So that's roughly about 160, 180 pounds each. There's also there's a vague definition of sustainable travel voucher. It doesn't necessarily need to be included for bus purposes. It could be used for cycling, and I know other schemes in other parts of the county have done cycle vouchers. So it doesn't necessarily mean that will correlate to a bus voucher.
Thank you. Councillor Copley.
Thank you. I just wanted to come back to, obviously, because it's an outline, you're talking about the physical nature of the site. Because I think we talked about it's on a hill. So I know obviously a lot of things will be covered in reserve matters, but have people looked about the flooding things? And I know there was mentioned about the idea of the houses being 2.5 stories high, although that obviously might come back later. But I just wanted officers to kind of cover whether we feel that any issues with the site itself in terms of it being so hilly from a flooding perspective, etc., of it being developed. Thank you.
So the site's all within flood zone 1, so the lowest risk of flooding. There is a very small amount of surface water flooding at the southern end of the site. The drainage, the flooding and drainage scheme, which has been looked at by the locally flood authority, takes account of this, and there are details of surface water runoff, water storage and attenuation that are included in the scheme. A more detailed scheme is required by condition. There's a detailed condition in there. On the site layout, on the parameter plans, there is a SUDS area shown at the southern end of the site. And part of the reason that's in that location is because there's a very slight slope towards that end of the site, and that's where the surface water flooding is. So that would be one of the attenuation basins, along with the other two towards the northern end of the site. So that's the other method by which surface water would be dealt with. But there's certainly no flooding or surface water issue here, which hasn't been accommodated in the drainage scheme.
I mean, I'm assuming when we get to the reserved matter stage, there'll be more conditions on just to make sure that that's absolutely covered, or that the conditions are sufficient when we have a bit more detail.
Yeah, it will be. Yeah, absolutely. It will be included as part of the landscaping and layout. I think the conditions on the outline cover the technical elements of it. The visual elements of it will be covered off at reserved matters stage. Yes.
Councillor Marlowe.
Yeah, I want to come back to the population expansion here, because my calculation, which is rough and amateur, suggests to me that the population, if we include the site that was given permission earlier in the year, we're talking about a 40–45% increase in population for somewhere that has very little. I mean, you've got one tiny shop in the garage, if I remember correctly. I don't think there's a pub existing any longer. Provision for people is very poor. And I am struggling with sustainability here, because everybody's going to go everywhere by car. There's no question about that. They're going to go, and it's not great car either, because they're going to go north to go south, mainly. So it doesn't really work in my head. I'm really struggling to understand why you think this is sustainable.
Thank you. So in terms of its location, it is adjacent to an existing village, clearly, and that is a much more sustainable site than a field in the middle of nowhere. So when we're looking at in terms of what's our preferable locations for development, we're not greenbelt, we're not in a national landscape, we're not in the middle of nowhere, we're not an isolated location in this application. This is located to us adjacent to a boundary that is identified in our development hierarchy as a settlement, and is in reasonably close proximity to two other villages of the same nature, Group 2 villages. In the officer report, there's mention of paragraph 83 of the NPPF, and that states that it's in paragraph 9.12, and it states that to promote sustainable development in rural areas, housing should be located where it will enhance or maintain the vitality of rural communities. Planning policy should identify opportunities for villages to grow and thrive, especially where this will support local services. Where there are groups of smaller settlements, development in one village may support services in another nearby. And then this is emphasised in the planning guidance that informs that. And it talks about all settlements can play a role in delivering sustainable development, and we should avoid having blanket policies against that. So I think the point of that guidance is to say, so to put it in layman's terms, there might not be a pub in a village because there's not enough people to use that pub, but if you put a few more people in that village, there might be enough custom to get one going, or to get a corner shop going, or to invest in
Can I ask
local.
members of the public not to shout out, please?
Or might encourage the growth of local businesses, which will apply employment for local people, which means they won't have to travel as far to work. So there is this conflict between the fact that this is only a Group 2 village. It's not one of our larger villages or an urban settlement, but we are being pushed by the NPPF towards looking at how to make rural communities more vibrant. And the way of doing that is to get more people in them, as long as it's in an appropriate manner. And this application, while it will bring a lot more people into the village, of course it will on the numbers, it does. It doesn't extend built form further north than there already is some. It's not an open field right on the edge of a village with nothing beyond it. It is contained on 3 sides by existing residential development. So in terms of increasing the vibrancy of a village and a rural community, this would do that.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm sorry, I'm a bit cynical about all of that. Your phrase, it's adjacent to the village. I think these people will always be adjacent to the village and not part of it, because it doesn't work. I really don't like these outline applications, because we don't really get to see very much about them, and then we're landed with it. So at this point, I'm not convinced at all.
There's a couple of things that I'd like members to sort of take on board at this point, and you've heard from my colleagues setting out the rationale for how officers have considered this site in terms of sustainability. I also think it's worth referring to the conclusion of the County Council's highways officers, and they've concluded that the application has overcome the original concerns in respect to highway safety and the sustainable accessible travel credentials of the site. And so, your County Council highways advisors considered that the application provides a comprehensive highway scheme that better accommodates pedestrians and cyclists travelling to and from the site to High Cross Village. There's a direct pedestrian access to the school for pupils. There's upgrades for the bus stops, improvements to the bus services in the Section 106, and that will ensure better bus services moving forward. It includes a sustainable, accessible transport contribution, and that's designed to support walking and cycling and public transport use moving forward. And so the development, it optimises its proportional mitigation, so to make the site more sustainable. And that's going upon what my colleague has said. That, in our view, has given the site its tools to become more sustainable in that sort of paragraph 110 to 115 of the NPPF. So from a policy perspective, from a perspective of the statutory consultees who've commented on the application and our assessment as officers, we've viewed the site on those terms, and members need to take that into account. In terms of, I just want to say something about the scale of the development. It isn't necessarily a policy test in GBR2 that development needs to be proportional to the size of the adjacent settlement. So we recognise that this development is in the rural area beyond Greenbelt.
Be a bit closer to your microphone.
Sorry, we recognise that the site is located within the rural area beyond the Greenbelt, adjacent to Group 2 village. But their policy test isn't about proportionality of the increase. And so what we have to have regard to is the requirements of GBR2, which we've assessed as there being a conflict with that policy. We've also acknowledged that there is a conflict with the development strategy, the hierarchy for development strategy in the district. And so in the planning balance that's set out in the report, we've given the adverse impacts of those moderate weight. And in terms of the planning balance, that's affording quite considerable weight in planning terms that weigh against this application. And so in terms of planning balance, you have those factors weighing against, along with the other limited harms that are in the balance. There are also the benefits that weigh on the other side. And so what officers have done is carry out that balance, acknowledging that this is not maybe one of the most highly sustainable locations within the district. However, measures have been taken to maximise the sustainability of the site through the 106 and other contributions, and we've weighed that against the benefits. In this case, the adverse impacts, in the officer's view, doesn't significantly, or the adverse impacts do not significantly or demonstrably outweigh the benefits of the application, and that's led to our recommendation.
Members, I'll draw your attention. I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with it, but on page 228, paragraph 1013 is where the table is with the weighing up of the pros and cons, if you like, of this application. I just thought it was an appropriate juncture just to revisit that. But I've got Councillor Burt and then Councillor Hill, the last two on my list.
Yeah, again, sort of coming back to the idea of schooling, and I know we're meant to just think about the merits of the plan itself, but I don't think it can be taken in isolation when every child who goes to secondary school is going to have to go into Ware, and as the lady at the beginning said, a huge amount of planning is already going through in that area. So you've got all those cars going from Village into Ware or Hertford, and I just think, like, we keep coming back to the fact it is unsustainable. Going into Ware during school time is horrible, quite frankly. And I just think
But what we need to hear is then if you're some argument that some discussion with a view to how highways have read this, have interpreted this. So
I think they're interpreting it quite differently to some of the people sitting around this table, maybe. But no, I don't want to speak for other people, obviously, but we keep coming back to the same thing, really. So, yeah.
So, Councillor Hill and then Councillor Dunlop.
So you've partially answered this already. So this lies outside the village boundary and is in conflict with the spatial strategy of East Herts District Council. And by the thing, I don't think it's sustainable. It's locking people into long-term car usage for anything. If you want to go shopping, you want to go to some entertainment centre, or go to your work, go to school, secondary school. So I would like to explain, because I'll just look at the table and I don't really get that this is solely down to numbers policy that we don't have a 5-year term. So that's the only reason for you're asking us to approve this. And
Councillor Hill, can you be a bit closer to your microphone?
Yeah,
as well?
yes, and I just want to put another question
Yeah,
on this.
just a
And
bit
this is
closer.
The second outline planning permission.
Graham, can you just speak a bit closer into your
Oh,
microphone?
sorry, I'm a hypocrite. I mean, this is the second outline planning permission that's come for this area that's out with the boundaries of the village. We've got the exact same thing. Are we not setting a precedent here that this field that we saw in the thing will suddenly just get sliced up into further developments that are outside the boundary, and we'll just get this extension so the villages end up joining up? What's to stop that?
So what's to stop it is that an application would have to come in for that, and members would have it within their power to refuse that application. So every application has to be determined on its own merits. In the planning balance, we've looked at the harms that have been caused by this application, and if further applications came in to try and extend into more open land beyond this site, then we would assess that and look at the landscape impacts, which are likely to be greater given that the site would be further into the open countryside, along with any other harms. So whatever those harms may be, and they would be part of a planning balance again. So when we talk about the planning balance and placing a significant weight on the supply of housing, that's not at all costs. That is part of a balancing exercise. So it doesn't mean that we would be setting a precedent to just allow every application that came before us. The next application, if it came before us, would be assessed as thoroughly as this one was, and the balancing exercise carried out. And as I say, it would then come before members for consideration as well.
I'd like to pick up on the weighting as well. And I think essentially what's been said in the room in terms of what weighs against this application, I think there's broad agreement in terms of that the development is results in the conflicts with the development strategy in the rural area beyond the Greenbelt set out in the back of the report. We've given that moderate weight, which is a high level of weighting that weighs against this application. What our advice would be as officers is that it would, in our view, not be possible to elevate that weight beyond moderate weight because of the 5-year supply issue and the tilted balance that applies. And so the weight that we give to our spatial strategies in locating developments in line with the hierarchy in DBS2 have to be tempered, in our opinion, and that is brought out in case law in appeals across the country, as it has been brought out in recent case law in East Hertfordshire. And so what members need to really consider, I suppose, is coming to their own weighting on the conflict with the district plan. We're advising you that there is that moderate negative weight that comes from reliance on private vehicle and increased vehicular trips. I think there's a consensus in the room on that overall impact, and that's a harm that weighs against. And then we raise the landscape and visual impact. We've given an overall weighting of that as being moderate adverse weight in the balance, but what's been brought out in the technical assessment is that this isn't a field that's subject to any national designations, and so again, it isn't possible, in our opinion, to elevate the harm beyond that moderate weight, and that is giving it a fair amount of weighting. And so you have those 3 areas of moderate adverse weight, and then you have to balance that with what the council have done or the officers have done in attributing the positive weight. And I think what I'm trying to sort of get members to think about is how you weigh the 2 benefits with the harms, because the harms are broadly agreed as we've set out, and the benefits are set out in the report, and so you need to do that balancing exercise.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
Because it's on that waiting point. The 40% affordable housing, is that set in stone, or can that change? Can the developer come back and do a viability assessment and say we can't afford it? And then, because that's given it significant weighting, and if it's not set in stone, then why is it given a significant weighting?
So as part of this application, it would absolutely be a requirement that would be part of the 106 agreement, which would tie the development to that provision. There is always the opportunity for an applicant to come back and seek to revise that 106 agreement. We can't prevent that, but that's sort of crystal ball gazing, and we can't take that into consideration in this decision, because as it is on the table, there's a 40% provision of affordable housing, which will be secured by 106. And that's the determining factor at this time.
So just for clarification, it's not set in stone.
Look, Councillor, we can't judge. We can only judge what's in front of us at the moment. We can't. We don't have a crystal ball, so we can't.
But what's in front of me is something that's not definite. It's like asking me to catch an ether and say, can I catch it?
Definite as planning law allows it to be, I think.
Yeah, the Section 106 agreement would secure that affordable housing, and that is equivalent to setting in stone through this planning permission the level of affordable housing. If viability becomes an issue down the line, an applicant can come back and try and argue that they can't provide it, and evidence could come to light that might back that up. But so there's no way that a planning authority or anyone for that matter can second guess what might come forward, and you are not able as decision makers to take that stance, I suppose, in the what if. You have to judge what's on the table here and what's secured in the Section 106 agreement and assign weighting equivalently.
Councillor Dunlop.
I'd like to explore a little bit more about the primary school. I think you said there are 55 people at the primary school and it has capacity of 105. Is that correct?
I didn't say that, but I understand that is the case. I looked on the website and there was spaces available for pupils in years 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So there is definitely space available, but I don't know the figures of that.
Okay, well, it was said somewhere tonight by someone. I'm just concerned that if this primary school is that far under capacity, is there a point where it no longer becomes viable, and having this development would help sustain the primary school in the village? I don't know if anybody can answer that question that's here, but it's just a concern that I have.
I suppose the hope is that extra children within the village would prevent a local school closing because it's too undersubscribed. I understand that has been the case with nearby schools, but you're right, I can't say anything beyond supposing rather than giving you any definites on that.
Thank you.
I mean, I think, just don't want to speak too much out of turn, but once the writing's on the wall for a school, that's when the numbers really start dropping, and it doesn't seem to have happened yet at that school. So, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I think the two elephants in the room here, I'm probably going to get told off for saying this, but there has been 2 developments here in High Cross in as many months, I think. I don't know when the first one was, but it's worth considering that they have a lot of development going on there. This is 95. I don't know what the other one was, 38 or something like that. It's worth taking that into consideration. This development as well it's crammed in on all 3 sides. Now, I'm going to do what I probably shouldn't be doing and put myself in the locals' shoes here. I wouldn't like it, and that's why I would recommend it doesn't happen. Thank you.
So the officer report does consider the cumulative impact, and that's in the planning balance. Sorry, what did you say about being on all 3 sides?
He wouldn't like to live there if it was penned in.
It's covered by housing on 3 sides.
Yes.
In fact, farm 2 sides for housing. And it seems crammed in with no access, or only the one access.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the conversations we had with the design officer was ideally, in design terms, you want to connect developments closely to what's around it. So you actually want to link it in and continue the built form. But in this case, actually, we took a view that there might be an argument for how it's been shown on the parameter plans and actually containing it further within the site. And that's to enable the SUDS provision to the south and the open space buffers which go to all the other sides of the site. That was a balance we did consider, but there is open space that buffers against all the other developments on site.
So it's 10 to 10 almost. I propose we extend this meeting until 10:30. Councillor Thomas seconds that. All those in favour? Thank you, that's carried. So I have Councillor Stowe.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, thank you. I just want to take a reality check really in this situation, because we're all saying it's not sustainable, and I agree with that personally. But we've got the 5-year housing supply, which is only at 3.7. So if we decide to refuse it tonight, we've got to get the reasons, and also they get it back on appeal. This is what happened in Buntingford some years ago. Every single site in Buntingford was got on appeal because we didn't have a land supply. But I just want to make that comment. That's all. We've got to be real.
I mean, this is one of the reasons really when we're looking at making decisions, we need to have really reasoned through, you know, we've got this balancing table here, and we're seeing moderate and stuff, and it's not enough to say that I disagree with the statutory things. It's more of a more nuance like that we need to be really arguing where that difference with officers, if there's any difference, or where that agreement is. And it's tricky because, as Councillor Stowe says, if this is refused and it goes to appeal, then it has to stand up to the same high standards as we saw in these reports. There's a very reasoned argument, and we need to be up to the task if we're both for and against. Councillor Devonshire, and then Councillor Copley.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to mention something completely different. Nobody else has mentioned this so far, and that is the archaeology on this site. We know this is close to or adjacent to the Ermine Road, which is historically is a very important Roman road. So I'm expecting lots of archaeological finds on this site. I mentioned this on the site on the other side of the road. I noticed there is a quite a detailed condition on this, but I'm wondering why has that been given any negative weight within your weighting table? So I noticed heritage impact is a limited negative weight. Does that come into that at all? Thank you.
So there is a separate section on archaeology in the officer report. You're right, and the county archaeologist agreed that it did have the potential to contain heritage assets with archaeological interest. The original application didn't come in with any initial survey work on that, and the county archaeologist requested that before the application was determined. So a geophysical survey of the site was carried out, and that included a programme of intrusive trenching, and there was no conclusive suggestion from that there was a presence of anything significant below ground. However, on that basis, the county archaeologists came back and said that they were potentially happy with the impact, subject to the imposition of a condition, and that requires more trial trenching on the site. So that would have to be carried out before any further development commenced. And on that basis, it's a neutral issue. There's no harm caused, and it's a matter that can be dealt with by condition.
Councillor Cochran.
Yeah, I think coming back to the theme we've had the whole time about sustainability, I think although we're all sitting here maybe feeling uncomfortable, the problem we've got is the statutory consultees have said that there isn't a problem. And we have to rely on them as experts because, as Councillor Stowe said, if this did go up to the Court of Appeal, they would quite easily be able to refer to that, and we wouldn't be able to have a leg to stand on, quite frankly. So I just thought I'd put that out there. Unless the statutory consultees want to change their mind at this stage, I don't know how we can not rely on that.
Can I draw members' attention back to the beginning of this debate? In fact, before the beginning of this debate, when some conditions were mentioned, and are members minded to look at those conditions, especially that were brought to our attention by one of the speakers? I think it was yes, it was Jacqueline Beater. And it was conditions 2, 11 and 38. If we could just have a look at those. Now, 2 is reserved matters. I'm not sure if we look at 11. 11 is the flood risk assessment, and and then 38 is the cycle storage. Now, I thought there was with regard if you allow me going backwards from 38, the cycle storage, just because Councillor Thomas has it on his screen here. There was a suggestion. How do we feel about the cycle storage? And I wonder if I could ask officers if it was possible to look at the consideration for electric bicycles. Would that be proportionate to ask if they could be charging?
Does that mean for the cycle storage to be big enough to accommodate an electric cycle, or to have charging points for it?
I felt that I thought it was the charging point.
I don't know how you charge an electric cycle. Is it from the same as a car point or a plug-in? Plug socket. So probably not proportionate at this stage. Electric car charging points are required with all dwellings. I think that probably, if it is just a plug, that wouldn't be proportionate, because you'd expect the houses to have that provision already.
And is there a sort of default security of cycle? Because it's a broad definition, cycle storage, and especially with electric bikes being so expensive, I think it would be reasonable to expect people to be able to store their electric bicycles securely. And I'm not. It doesn't go into a great deal of detail on the secure.
So
It just mentions the cycle
yeah,
storage.
so at reserve matters stage, you would have greater detail about the actual buildings going on site, including the storage as well as this condition tying it down. So that detail would come in at a later stage when there was further clarity on exactly what buildings are going where and what they look like. So the cycle storage buildings would likely be included as part of that. And I suppose it would be up to the applicants, the occupiers, to put padlocks on the provision.
I think we could probably look at wording of that condition, number 38, that would require prior to first occupation provision of facilities for cycle storage, and then perhaps include the provision of how you would get power to the location of those storage units. And so if it's in an enclosure outside in the back garden, then the detail would be required to tell them how they're going to get power into that back garden. I mean, that could be through underground cabling, or it could be through extension cables. But I think that amending the condition to include that wording would at least provide the detail that would come forward in order to discharge that condition.
Yeah, sorry, I see what you mean about actually having the power inside the
Yeah.
Yeah, that would absolutely be how we could deal with it. Yeah, the main condition.
Councillor Marlowe.
Sorry, I'm banging on here a bit. Paragraphs 96 to 108 of the NPPF are about promoting healthy and safe communities, amongst which it says promote social interaction, including opportunities for meetings between people who might not otherwise come into contact with each other, for example, through mixed-use development, strong neighbourhood centres, street layouts that allow easy pedestrian and cycle connections within and between neighbourhoods, and active street frontages. There's a whole number of other paragraphs in there. This scheme is going to increase the size of this settlement by getting on for 50% to over 1,000, probably over 1,000 people. I don't see that there is any planning that is putting that in play. And I also don't see that anybody out there is going to say, oh, well, we'll build a community centre for High Cross. I don't see where that is coming from, because East Herts isn't going to do it. I don't think we've got the money. I don't think HCC are going to do it. And if they do, it's going to take 10 or 15 years, by which time you're going to have lots of not very nice things going on in this estate that isn't functioning as part of the community. So unless somebody can explain to me how that's going to happen, and there's all sorts of other things in here. Enable and support healthy lives through promoting good health and preventing ill health, where this would address identified local health and wellbeing needs and reduce health inequalities. For example, oops, my screen's gone off, through the provision of safe and accessible green infrastructure, sports facilities, local shops, access to healthier food, allotments, yeah, and layouts that encourage walking and cycling.
So there are a significant, as part of the conversation with the Highways Authority, when they initially were concerned that it couldn't be made a sustainable location, there are a lot of additional highway improvements proposed along High Road to connect into the site, and that includes quite significant extra cycleway provision to take occupiers of development right into the village. And there's a little service, I think they describe it as a service road, but a little road on High Road that sort of goes behind some houses, and there's quite a lot of work in front of the houses, but kind of circumvents the road a bit. There's quite a bit of work to take pedestrians and cyclists away from the road along that. So there is a lot of improvements proposed for the scale of this site to encourage the use of sustainable means of travel. And the Highways Authority do make particular reference to that. They do make reference to the fact that the site does have those sustainable means of access.
Yeah, but where are the local shops? Where are the sports facilities? Where is the community centre? It doesn't exist. I don't see it. I don't see where it's going to come from to support this bigger, much bigger population. I don't see it.
That's not what's on the table. What you're being
No.
considered. So
And
the-
that's exactly my point.
I want
It's
to
not on the table.
I want to establish what the policies that you have to consider to consider this application, and the key policies in the MPPF are paragraphs 110 and 115, and I'll pick out the key elements that members have to consider. One of them is providing opportunities to maximise sustainable transport solutions will vary between rural areas, should be taken into account in plan making and decision making. Significant development such should be focused on locations which are or can be made sustainable through limiting the need to travel and offering a genuine choice of transport modes. That's one of them. And then the second one is 115, and that paragraph states, in assessing sites that may be allocated for development or applications for development, it should be ensured that sustainable transport modes are prioritised, taking into account the vision for the site, type of development and its location. You've heard that the county's highways authority has considered it has met that first part of the policy, and it is a transport vision for the development that does promote walking and cycling. You can see from the slides that you've seen tonight that it has maximised what it can do. It's proportionate to the scheme. Safe and suitable access to the site can be achievable for all users. You've heard and seen in the presentation that the site is accessed by foot to the south and by the north and to the west, and that has been subject to an auditing process. In terms of the design of the streets, parking areas, that will be subject to detailed consideration at reserved matters. And then lastly, any significant impacts from the development on the transport network in terms of capacity and congestion or on highway safety can be cost effectively mitigated to an acceptable degree through a vision-led approach. And the county's highways authority has come to the conclusion that it meets that part of the test. It has done it through a cost-effective mitigation to an acceptable degree through this approach. And so they're the key tests that the members have to consider against that test. And if they find it compliant, then our advice would be to support it. But if they find there's a conflict with that element, then you've got a different way of considering it.
So there we are. So I think I'm going to bring in Rachel Lee.
Thank you, Chair. I sense that things might be drawing to a bit of a close, so it's probably an opportune moment for me to just say my piece about the tilted balance, just so that all members have in their mind, kind of as a matter of law, how planning applications have to be determined. So that, as you're very well rehearsed and aware of, that presumption in favour of sustainable development means, in paragraph 11 of the MPPF, means that your local plan policies that you are considering in the context of determining this application, they are considered to be out of date because of your lack of 5-year housing supply, and therefore the council is expected to grant planning permission for residential schemes unless those adverse impacts would significantly and demonstrably outweigh their benefits when assessed against the relevant policies in the MPPF taken as a whole. So it's just to reiterate what the planning officers said, that considerable weight must be given to the MPPF and the tilted balance considerations and the lack of the housing supply in how you weight and balance all of these difficult sort of material and policy considerations that are relevant to this scheme. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Copley.
I was just wondering if we could go back to conditions 11 and 2.
Yes, let's do
Thanks.
that. Now, I've just, because it's in front of me now, condition 11 is the flood risk assessment accordance. Now, is there anything do you think could be, is there anything members would like to amend with that? I think we heard from officers that there was a lot going to come forward at reserved matters about the finer details. Is that right? Or are the details in front of us now?
So I think we were talking about the SUDS provision, that there would be greater detail about
All right.
the visual of that, but the local lead flood authority has recommended this to secure the technical detail.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my feeling is that's quite robust there. I think that the speaker was concerned about adjacent problems, but is there sufficient here to guard against flooding problems affecting the beyond the site?
From my understanding, yes, but I would absolutely defer to the technical consultee who considers it is sufficient. Yes.
I think we're kind of nailed down by the technical consultee on this one. Councillor Copley?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, from experience in my ward, if they check the land levels and things at that point, so it's not a situation where you've got the flooding running onto existing houses, they make sure they know what the land levels are to start with, and the new houses aren't raised up at all to make the flooding risk higher. But I'm assuming, tell me if I'm wrong, that will be dealt with in reserved matters, because that's a key concern for me. Yes. Thank you.
And looking at 2, and this is a fairly standard reserved matters thing, the approved plans. Was there anything you wanted to raise with condition 2? If not, I'm going to move towards a proposal, if anyone is minded to.
Sorry, can I just quickly say on condition 2, I'm presuming like the building's heights we will take into at that stage. And
Yes.
I mean, there's been suggested 2.5, but I mean, I don't know if that is the right height and whether it should be limited to 2. But I'm again assuming that we can't put anything in this condition at this stage, and that would be something to look at in reserved matters. Is that correct? Yeah.
I think we looked at condition. Yeah. Councillor Still, almost
I
missed you
think
there.
the important thing to think about heights of buildings is when we talk about 2.5 stories, it's actually an ordinary house with a roof, and they put rooms in the roof. The actual ridge height won't be any greater than houses of 2 stories.
No, it's fairly. It seems a fairly. It's something I've seen quite a lot. Is anyone minded to make a proposal? Okay, I'm going to propose to go with the recommendation and grant planning permission. Do I have a seconder?
So I'm assuming that's subject to the changes to
Sub-
condition 38.
Subject to the changes we discussed in condition 38. Councillor Dunlop has seconded. I'm going to ask you, all those in favour? Higher, please.
1, 2, 3.
And all those against? And abstentions? 1. So permission is granted.
Okay, thank you very much for moving on. Thank you.
End this meeting. We have item number 6, and this is and very much thanks to
Could I say
Councillor
something?
Stowe.
I was going to say thanks to the officers for that report. It's a report I'm delighted to see back on our agenda, and I have read them this evening, so that's good. Thank you.
If anyone, does any member wish to seek clarification or comment on item 6? If not, it's just for, we don't even need to vote for that. We're noting that. Thank you to officers for that. It's very interesting. Urgent business. There are no items, and there is no part 2 business. So that concludes the meeting at 12 minutes past 10.